Good evening. I'd like to call to order the special city council meeting of June 25th, 2024. And if I could have you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Ohlone people, who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Ohlone land, the land that Pinole sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Ohlone community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. Next item on the agenda is roll call, city clerk's report, and statement of conflict.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Toms.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sasai.
Here.
Councilmember Tave.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez-Rubin.
Here.
Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Interim City Manager Gang.
Here.
City Attorney Kasher.
Here.
Deputy Clerk Stone.
Here.
Mayor and Council, the agenda was posted on Thursday, June 20th at 11:30 a.m. Written comments were received in advance of the meeting, distributed to the City Council, posted on the website, and made available to the public at the back of the dais. Does the council have any conflicts to report on our agenda items this evening? Seeing none, I'm going to turn it over briefly to City Attorney Kasher, who is going to now provide a quick report out from the special meeting that was convened on June 12th.
Thank you, City Clerk. We did have a special City Council meeting on June 12th to interview city manager candidates. There was no reportable action from that closed session on that date, but we do plan on bringing an employment agreement forward on July 2nd for approval by the City Council, and that will be the next action on that item. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have no closed session item tonight. The next item on the agenda is citizens to be heard. Public comments. The citizens may speak under any item not listed on the agenda. Time limit is 3 minutes and is subject to modification by the mayor. Individuals may not share or offer time to another speaker, and pursuant to the provisions of the Ralph M. Brown Act, no action may be taken on a matter unless it's listed on the agenda or unless certain emergency or special circumstances exist. And the council may direct staff to investigate and/or schedule certain matters for consideration at future council meetings. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. In person, we have 5. We'll start with Bob Kopp, Leah Rohrbach, and Ana Avila.
Yeah, I want to thank the council for, is this working? For letting me speak tonight. I have a lot of concerns. One thing I was told that we have a $1,500,000 deficit, and by having that, I wonder why that we gave to the county $250,000 for something that they have set up in order to give back to the city certain things once the city finds out that they can ask for it. So out of $250,000, if the city of Pinole residents that pay for this tax money that just spent, if they get 25% on the dollar, they'll be lucky, because most of them won't know anything about how to fill the farms out and that. And I don't think that should have been spent. And I would like to know why 2 of the city council people that went to college has to have somebody to help them do their job. Since 1903, none of the city council members for all these years have had to request help to do their job. And I think that money should have been spent toward the police department and other agencies in the city that could use funds, the maintenance, the police. I think they need a lot of help, and we have cut back. Now there was information came out that some of the police are not going to be adding any more officers to our streets and that. And right now we're down officers, and we need more help. So you can see what's going on. Stop signs are non-existent in Pinole, especially on Pinole Valley Road. I see them go by when I turn on it, doing 35 miles an hour. They don't even slow up, and we don't have enough offers for that. So I think you need to redirect some of this money that you're giving away and let it go back into the city to help the city. Public Works needs more people to fill the potholes. As everybody that lives in Pinole knows, there's potholes everywhere. One of the streets that a friend of mine lives on, if the street sweeper comes in, all he does is make a big mess because there's no asphalt. It's all gravel and dust and dirt. And every time I go out there and make a U-turn in front of his house, going slow even kicks up a lot of dirt. But I think you need to redirect what's going on in the city far as where the money goes. If we're that much in the hole, how can we afford to give money to somebody to help these two guys? I don't see why we should do that, and we shouldn't do it. And I guess the last thing I want to say is right here, there's a $1,000 in cash, and I'll be the first one to put money in for a recall for him. Thank you, and have a nice day.
Mr. Kopp, can I ask for clarification on one of the items? $250,000 going to the county?
Yeah, there's some kind of program that the county had to help with the changing from natural gas to electricity and putting in swamp, stuff like that. Well, you know how hard it is.
I just wanted to clarify what that was for. It's not for the county, it's for residents.
Yeah, but you have to go through the county to get it. And you know what kind of procedure that is. You work there.
Hello, my name is Leisha, and I've worked for the Pinole Police Department for over 7 years. From the start, concerns have been raised about the window, the openness of our window, and we've repeatedly requested installation of safety glass. I don't know if you've seen the video, but 2 weeks ago to this day, I was attacked working there. Was what I asked deemed to be too expensive, or was it not a priority? This is not the first time I've had someone aggressive. It's part of the job. But it is the first time someone has done something that we have voiced could happen. I'm lucky he didn't have a weapon, and I'm lucky for the sworn personnel that I work with. It could have been much worse than my arm and my mental health that was damaged. I love my job, but I'm scared to do my job right now. The window has been a hot topic in our department and with others. And when people come to visit, every single time I get asked, why are we so exposed? There's a proposal to spend $600,000 on rejuvenating our department. The problem is nothing has to do with the safety of us. The PD actually was asked to do a safety assessment, and my area was presented as a significant safety liability. I'm asking for my safety to be considered a priority in the proposed rejuvenation project and the safety glass to be added so I can go home to my family at night. My safety and all employee safety should be a priority. If I were your daughter, your mother, your sister, your wife, we would not be having this discussion. So I'm asking this council, please make sure I go home each night, as next time I might not. Thank you.
Good evening, council members and staff. As you know, I'm Anna. I'm the president of the Local 1. And on behalf of my brothers and sisters of Local 1, I wanted to express gratitude for the efforts that are underway from Commander Avery, talking to staff about a plan for the safety of the counters at City Hall and Pinole Police Department. we just heard what happened with one of our sisters. So I ask this council that you please give direction to staff and, most importantly, allocate funds to make the safety of your employees your number one concern. Thank you in advance for all your efforts to remedy the situation that took place at police department. Thank you.
The next speakers are Rob Sexton, Amy Eubanks, and Rafael Menes.
Mayor and council members, good evening. I just kind of wanted to talk about the streets of Pinole. They seem to be getting worse.
Sir,
and
will
worse.
you pull the mic up so we can hear you a little better? Thank you.
Okay. They seem to be getting worse, and I just more or less want to know when we might expect some repair to be done. If I don't know, I know you folks like to take surveys, spend money on that, but you just have to drive out Pinole Valley Road past Seamus out there and drive in all the ruts. There's no striping on the street almost all the way out to the county line out there. I live up at the end of Wright Avenue. There's no striping at all on the streets going up Wright Avenue. I live on Jordan Way. It's basically turned into a dirt road. It's impossible to keep my truck clean because all the people coming in and out of there, it's just makes a mess out of everything. There's rocks on the sidewalk. There's rocks on my driveway. There's rocks in my garage that my wife drives through all the time, bringing them into the garage. The sweeper came up there the other day. He made more of a mess of that street up there than if he wouldn't have showed up at all. If you'd like to see some pictures, I'll show you pictures of the sweeper going by with dust 20 feet in the air. He windrows the rocks up, comes in and out of there, just makes a complete mess of the place. I've had to sweep all the rocks into the gutter, shovel them all up to try and keep the dust down in my neighborhood in front of my home. And I really like to know when something was going to be done about this. I'm tired of the mess and I see nothing getting done. But striping on the street on Pinole Valley Road is kind of a hazardous thing because you can't see the left turn lanes anymore. You don't know what side of the street to be on. I'd like to see something done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. My name is Amy Eubanks. I am the union president, and tonight I am reading a letter that was drafted by a union member who wished to remain anonymous. Dear City Council, I am aware of the financial difficulties the City Council claims the city is now facing, but I'm curious, why is the issue surfacing now? What did Mayor Devin Murphy and the council members do last year to try and minimize this issue from growing to the level they claim it has reached now? Mr. Murphy and Mr. Sasai ran on political statements that they would govern in a way to reduce harm to the community and be inclusive of the wants and needs of the community. However, the following are examples of how Mr. Murphy and Mr. Sasai are not doing this. They are harming our community and they are marginalizing the voices of our community members. Number one, at the last council meeting, Mr. Murphy stated he did not want to hire police officers to fill the vacancies that were created by officers leaving the department. These are not extra positions. These are positions that are needed to maintain the minimum level of service the police department provides to help keep us safe. Many of us have heard of the increased burglaries in the valley, the homicide that happened near the Methodist Church, the shooting that happened at the Chevron station near the high school, and the traffic problems in our city. How can Mr. Murphy possibly believe we need fewer police officers? If anything, we need more. Number two, when it came to being inclusive to the needs of our community members, a community survey was taken a few weeks ago and showed the following. 58% of community members do not want to lower any part of the police budget. 61% do not want to lower the police support services budget. And 66% do not want to lower the police dispatch budget. These numbers show strong community support for the police. If Mr. Murphy and Mr. Sasai or other council members were inclusive of the wants and needs of the community, they would not marginalize the community's spoken voice. In fact, if you didn't already know, our police officers are historically some of the lowest paid officers in the county. Number 3, something I noticed that was missing from the budget reduction conversation was a reduction to the fire department's budget. Why are they exempt when every other city service is being considered? I know we contract these services out, but does the contracting these services out mean we lose all financial decisions on the cost? I hope these points encourage City Council to focus on reducing harm to the community, increasing the public safety, and becoming inclusive of the community's voice.
Rafael Menes.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Rafael Menes. I'm a resident of the city of Pinole. I also have some comments about the budget, but I'm going to save my comments for when it actually comes up on the agenda. For citizens to be heard, I'd like to talk about the current rate of COVID-19 in the community. Based on the CDC's current data available, it looks like our wastewater concentrations in nearby areas are showing substantial increases in COVID levels over the past several weeks. One site shows an increase to levels above those of February 17th as of June 17th. So while hospitalization levels don't yet reflect that, they seem to have roughly leveled off at about 4 per 100,000, or slightly less, probably like 3.8. It's often a trailing indicator to the level of wastewater in sewage. So if you haven't gotten your booster shots, I would encourage people to do so. And if you're in an at-risk population, I would encourage you to wear masks indoors in crowded areas until, COVID rates start to decline again, because right now they're still increasing. Thank you.
Irma Ruport.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and public, and I do have a few things to talk about right now. However, I do want to say quickly, these problems that we have weren't born yesterday, weren't born by the current council members here. Check out your old ones. They're here talking. They're out here. Are they starting a campaign? No. Tell the citizens, why are we in the streets are in poor shape? They didn't start yesterday. They didn't start today. Guess what? They've been bad for the last 10, 20 years. So let's get a reality check. Let's follow the money, start following the problems where they started and where they haven't been solved. The next thing I want to say is, don't forget that the agenda has the Ralph M. Brown Act, Government Code 54950. In enacting this chapter, the legislator finds and declares that the public commissions, boards, and councils, and the other public agencies in the state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so they may retain control over the instruments they have created. The other concern I have, Mayor, is I found that there's an announcement for the new chief of police, because I know our chief is retiring this year. It's unheard of a current police chief and interim city manager out announcing for his own job. It's not fair. It's not super productive for the city. We're hiring a city manager. We need to start pulling that vacancy out until we get a new city manager and bring him on board and help him, let him help us decide with the council who's the best person. I totally feel it's a conflict of interest. We shouldn't have our police chief, an interim city manager, recruiting for this position. He needs to step aside, and I think it's unfair for him to do that. And the other thing I want to report is KRO and Channel 4 Pinole Pride and Juneteenth celebration will be featured tomorrow, 6:30 p.m., Wednesday, June 26, with the interview of former Mayor Murphy and current council member. He was interviewed. It's a great event and a broadcast, and I hope it's broadcasted on 26 and 28. So in the future, Let's figure out how to solve these problems. They weren't born yesterday, and they weren't here today with these council members. Let's talk back of who started the problem and why they did it and how much it's costing us and why we're in the hole that we're in. That's the real reality, and let's follow the money and go back. I know they're here and they're moaning and groaning, but I don't care. Thank you.
Debbie Long, followed by Pete Murray.
When I left office, we were balanced. That's all I'm going to say to that. Tonight, I am addressing the actions of both Devin Murphy and Cameron Sasai and the collusion that occurred that resulted in the cancellation of last week's council meeting. I would hope that Cameron will give me the attention that he's supposed to as a council member. I would ask our attorney to let him know that he's required to. Because Tave was on vacation, Cameron realized after talking to staff that they did not have the votes to pass everything they wanted in the budget. Nor more importantly, did they have the votes to pass the agenda item to have an elected paid mayor put on the November ballot. Cameron then called Devin, and shortly thereafter, Devin claimed that he was still in Washington, D.C. and would not be there for the meeting. Later that afternoon, Cameron told a staff member that he would not be there either because, you know, things come up. People can get sick. These two deliberately left the council without a quorum and closed down and held hostage the business of the city because they couldn't get their way with a vote. Only one other time in the history of Pinole has council members done the same action, and that was during the 2008 recall. Pretty much why these members were recalled as well. And for those of you trying to get a town hall meeting for the sewer rate increase, tonight could have been that meeting. Instead, it will be July 2nd, when it's more likely that people will be out of town for the holiday. Win-win for both Devin and Cameron all the way around. I would say these two deflected from the democratic way and lied to deceive the public. To lie and cheat, what a great example and lesson for those $30,000 a year interns that they mentor. Shame on Devin and Cameron. Hopefully the people remember your disrespect of the process only for you to want to promote your power. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, staff. Appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Had a comment earlier about going back and looking at issues, and the person that was sitting here chastising past councils has a very selective memory and continues to impose that selective memory routinely, and it doesn't match the facts. So I came to talk to you about the report today from the California cities that talked about the state of the state and our governor. It reported that his head of staff coerced the district attorneys groups for the state of California about their wanting to put a proposition on the ballot to restore the penalties for crimes, particularly against retail establishments and crimes in general. And his staff, head of staff, according to this article, tried to play a political game with them and coerce them into not putting it on the ballot until after 2026. This is reported. And that includes Darrell Steinberg as well, was part of that. And the obvious reason is the reason most things occur. It was political, and it was to keep it off the ballot, because as soon as these amendments are made to that 247, the crime rate statistics would go through the roof. And then you would see the reality of what's going on in the state. And then the politicians would be held accountable for those changes that they previously made that unleashed a torrent of crime and the devastation to the communities of the state of California. So I just wanted to report that and put it on record that it wasn't missed, and that that's how you manipulate crime statistics, is to declare that these are not crimes anymore. So that should be, again, noted. No, I won't say any more. It was good enough.
Mayor, we do have one online.
Okay.
Telephone caller, last four numbers 5748.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Anthony Bosbrink, longtime citizen of Pinole, over 40 plus years, taxpayer. I'd first like to echo one of the last speaker's comments, pretty much in full, if not by 110%. I believe public speaker Debbie Long. I was really taken aback by the cancellation of the meeting, and I know several of my friends and some neighbors were as well wanting to tune into that meeting and or to add public comment. But it wasn't till 1 hour before the meeting did we get a secondhand notice from one of the members of the community who has better inside line than I do to what's really going on in the city hall, but it just was a cancellation notice. And I know they canceled it that afternoon at like 3:30 in the afternoon. So why wasn't the cancellation and the public given a better notice than 2 hours or 1 hour to that, or an hour and a half to that effect? Why wasn't it put on the public TV? You know, so there is some kind of collusion going on in City Hall there, whether it's and the staffers that cow down to some of our politicians, our elected politicians, and or I believe there should be an investigation for a possible violation of the Brown Act as such. When you can't have a majority or a quorum at a meeting, obviously you can't have the meeting, but somebody made some phone calls and all of a sudden the meeting was canceled. Secondly, I'd like to also state that I was personally disappointed 2 meetings ago, live meetings ago, not the council meeting, that I was basically—
Sir, you have 45 seconds.
Censored or restrained on the second public comment. Granted, Heather Bell does a good job when she's there, but her assistant, who I guess obviously pre-screens the public comment citizen calls, zoned me out, cut me off at the last citizen comment, and without giving 30 seconds or a minute of time like some of the other city councils do in Vallejo and everything like that. I know maybe it was 11 o'clock in the evening, but the mayor decided to close the meeting while I was put on hold with my hand raised, and I never got called. And, you know, that's not the first time that happened. It happened 1 or 2 times.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments?
There are no more public comments.
Okay, thank you. All right, next we're going to go to reports and communication. I will start with some of my activity that I've done in the last 3 weeks. I did take a tour of Vista Woods. It's under construction and very close to getting their temporary occupancy permit for a portion of it. And I also attended the mayor's conference, and it was in the city of Pittsburgh, and we had a presentation from the county librarian on the status of the countywide library systems. I attended the Pride and Juneteenth event, and I'd like to thank all the staff who put that together. It was a really nice event, and I had comments from people in the city and visitors to Pinole about what a nice event it was. We did have a municipal code meeting, Vice Mayor Sasai and I, so that we could finalize discussion of a number of ordinances, including the EV charging ordinance. I did attend an Earthquake Country Alliance Bay Area Spring 2024 workshop, and that was held at Rossmore. Very good information, and it reminds us that we do live in earthquake country, and we are very close to, the possibility of a natural disaster at any time. So that was very good. Our city attorney already reported out on our special council meeting, and then we had our WestCat meeting for this month was canceled. I participated in the Upper Pinole Creek watershed cleanup with the Friends of Pinole Creek, and also attended the car show this weekend. And I would like to thank all of the volunteers, all of the city staff that worked on putting that together. It was a very successful event, and I look forward to hearing more about that later. Last Friday, I attended via Zoom the policy committee meeting for Cal Cities. I sit on the Housing, Community, and Economic Development Committee, where we had some discussion about economic development that occurs in Oceanside, California, to give us some examples of some of the things they've been working on. We had a very robust discussion on an item that's going to be returning to the ballot in November, and that's this one is called the Justice for Renters Act. And then, let's see, I also wanted to reiterate that normally we cancel the meeting in July, early July, because of the holiday, but we do need to bring a contract forward for a new city manager, so we will have a brief meeting. And then we have a number of ordinances that we were not able to have tonight that are carried over from last week that will also be on that meeting. So we do anticipate it being a short meeting, and then once we close that meeting at 7 o'clock, we will hold a workshop for the sewer rates. We have our consultant coming in to discuss those issues and hopefully answer some questions that have come up from the citizens. I do want to note that tomorrow morning our police department will be participating in the Northern California Torch Run. Pinole officers will take the Special Olympics torch from Hercules Police Department at 8:45. That'll happen on the community corner area. So spectators are welcome to come out and support law enforcement torch run. That torch is making its way down to the University of Santa Clara for opening ceremonies for their summer games for Special Olympics on Friday. And that is the end of my report. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Toms. And a short report for tonight. Was pleased to join folks at the F-Bank Annual Gala, and that was the Filipino Bar Association of Northern California. And also pleased to meet our Superior Court Judge Benjamin Reyes, who is also our former city attorney. And so it was great to finally meet him and join him for that occasion. Also attended the API Lead Summit, and was so really grateful to meet with all of our regional leaders nationally. Attorney General Rob Bonta, San Francisco City Attorney David Chu, talk about retail theft, all the things that really relate to Pinole and public safety here. So was pleased to join them all. And lastly, met on the Municipal Code Update Subcommittee with Mayor Toms, and we worked on the EV charging ordinance, made some amendments to that per some of the committee's discussion, as well as taking on the safe storage of firearms ordinance. Yes, and glad to make some amendments there and make it as strong as possible to make sure that folks are safe from gun violence here in Pinole. So it was a great time to work with Mayor Toms in the 6 months while it lasted, but that'll be our last meeting code meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I wanted to start off my report tonight by always another business in our community has now started. This afternoon, we were able to visit the new Benjamin Moore Paint Center on Fitzgerald Avenue. Congratulations to the family. It's an eco paint center that is a beautiful center. I encourage our residents to go out there. Yet another business is opening in Pinole, and it's actually a very, very wonderful business. If you're looking to paint your home or even a school or a building, exciting times for Pinole as we continue to open new businesses. In the past, we've reported back about our Nick the Greek and Pinole opening Taqueria La Cocina and many others. So just really excited about that. And I know the mayor as well as Councilmember Martinez Rubin joined myself in the grand opening that was hosted by the Bayfront Chamber this afternoon. So really exciting times. Also wanted to congratulate and thank staff for the wonderful second dual celebration of Juneteenth and Pride celebration. We had over 400 attendees attend in the Fernandez Park area a couple weeks ago. I was super excited that we continue what is now a new tradition in the city of Pinole, but also that we continued the tradition of actually getting news covered about it. So really excited to have spoken with Noelle Bowl from Cron 4 News. We now have, this is the second time we've had our event featured in Cron 4. And so it's a really exciting time for our community. But again, just that event has so much pride and community empowerment. And it's really exciting that we're continuing this tradition and growing this program as we continue to see more people come out, more folks excited about partnerships for next year. And again, the news and media really covering something that's so important to so many in our community. So thank you to the resident who also mentioned the feature that was highlighted on Juneteenth and will be highlighted again tomorrow afternoon in the Cron 4 News at around 6 p.m. Last two updates I wanted to mention is a lot of folks have followed this, but I think as council members and many folks across the state have followed the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. This is actually a very funny title for the act because it actually did the exact opposite. But for the first time in decades, the California Supreme Court has taken a citizens' initiative off the ballot before voters could weigh in. Justices on the state's highest court unanimously ruled that the measure known as the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, also known as TPA, is essentially an illegal constitutional revision, and only the legislator has the authority to put a proposed revision before voters. And so essentially what would have made it very hard for us to ask residents and ask voters for additional funding, as many councils and many cities have done before us, this was in some ways a very deceptive measure that would have made it very hard for government and many other entities, including some of our JPAs and things like that, to ask voters how they wanted to fund their own services. And so what's really exciting is the California Supreme Court has essentially taken that off the measure for November, or off the ballot for November, and that also allows us as a city, but many other cities, to kind of move forward in identifying innovative forms of financing to fund their cities. I just wanted to let residents know, I think we have a council agenda item coming up about that, but we may not need to spend staff resources on that anymore, as it is something that won't be on this year's ballot. And then last but not least, I wanted to note, because it's coming up, I've seen, and residents have been very concerned about it, but the sewer rate conversation. This one is really a personal matter. I think, as someone whose family's grown up here, I was really surprised to see so much of our city's infrastructure dilapidated when I first started the council. Between the sewers and the roads, we talk a lot about infrastructure in the city, and we have a lot of work to do. And so as I've talked to neighbors and walked around, I've been asked about, these things and how we're fixing that. This is one of the biggest issues of our time right now as we think about, maybe the infrastructure maybe that we don't see. I'm sure if we had a little bit more dilapidated infrastructure, we would start smelling these. But I wanted to just say that it's really important. I want to encourage residents to attend the July July 2nd workshop. But I also wanted to, really say this now and have residents reach out to me personally to share space with folks to discuss this. I mean, at the end of the day, this is about putting a stake in the ground and starting to work together for the solutions together. And so it's really important that if residents have questions, of course, attend the July 2nd workshop, but also reach out. I mean, I am very open to other alternative and innovative models to finance what is such an important infrastructure for our community. But again, if those are ideas that folks have, if folks have new ideas, I would say I'm willing to listen, and I would venture to say most of the council members are also willing to listen. So again, thank you for residents who continue to make their voice heard, both through public comment, but also emails. I want to just, again, make a calling to say if there are residents who are interested in having these conversations, want to set coffee, want to have a conversation outside or in addition to the July 2nd workshop, please reach out. I'd be happy to talk to you. So that's it for now, Mayor, and I'll take it to the next council member. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez-Rubin?
Thank you. Since we last met, I attended the city manager sales tax working group, which is a working group that was put together by CalCities, a statewide group that included city managers throughout the state. And since the time that I was the chair of the CalCities Revenue and Taxation Policy Committee, I was given the privilege of serving as an ex officio member for the past 2 years. The City Manager's Sales and Tax Working Group has ended its tasks of reviewing possible ways of reforming how taxes are distributed in the state of California. Something that I've learned over the past 2 years, and is also the case here locally among City Council, is depending on the appetite of your policymakers, there are opportunities or the right timing is such that the policymakers, in this case the state legislature, or state legislators, both in the Senate and the Assembly, may be willing to hear new proposals that align with their interest. In the case of the recommendations out of this city manager's sales tax working group, some of the items that we reviewed and discussed were the existence of sales tax agreements, particularly in large cities. We happen to have in our neighbor city, Richmond, one that may have such agreements where large businesses, some of the businesses which we use as consumers to deliver online purchases may have business or warehousing facilities and use the roads that we have to transport those goods locally, but the local city or local jurisdiction may not get the benefit of the sales tax associated with those purchases. It'll be a long way coming before there is any change in existing tax law, but it is an item of discussion that has been in discussion for the past, 8 years or so. And the group looks forward to having eventually CalCities lobbyists along with legislators to be identified who may pick up that item as something to take through the legislature to create some tax reform. The other item that was heavily discussed was the distribution of sales taxes through the county pools. So the taxes that we receive as a city are only a portion or a fraction of what gets distributed to the county pools where your tax dollars, our tax dollars are used by a number of different agencies, public agencies in the county, including to a large extent the school district. So how those taxes are eventually distributed makes a difference to us locally here in Pinole because we don't see necessarily for every dollar that you contribute as a taxpayer the entirety of that distribution. And for better view of how our tax dollars are distributed, in the budget document that we are reviewing today, there is an illustration that staff has put together about how both property taxes and sales taxes are distributed among the different agencies. I also met specifically with the Cal City's Policy Committee on Revenue and Taxation to review much of what the city manager's sales and tax work group had recommended, as well as to look forward to further discussions about possible reform in the future. On the 21st, which was just this past Friday, I served as your delegate at the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, and at that meeting, the delegates voted to pass that organization's budget. And the implications for all cities that are members of ABAG, Pinole included, is that we will see a 10% increase in our membership dues. So I think staff probably has taken that into account as annually those dues increase, and also has a bearing on how much assistance, or we take advantage of the technical assistance that ABAC provides, particularly when we have small planning departments like we do here in the city. So that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Tave.
Nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is council requests for future agenda items. Any items? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, one item, Mayor Toms. I'd like to request a council-level discussion on implementing safety measures in our public facilities here in Pinole.
Okay. And any other discussion? And if I can just ask the interim city manager, is that something that's already ongoing with the police department?
So there's been ongoing efforts, but I think that having the discussion is valid and listening to the community to give us a little direction. I think it's going to come to a point where we'll have to get some direction from council and the community.
Okay, thank you, and I'll second that. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, that was all. Any other items?
Yes, Mayor, I have one. I would like to convene a closed session in the form of a performance evaluation of the interim city manager to solicit his feedback on best practices and performance, and to inform the benchmarking and performance process of the new incoming city manager.
So a transition?
Transition, yeah. And I talked to the city attorney about this, so we just thought that would be best to have a formal meeting.
Can we ask that it occur either, if it passes, either the 16th of July or the 13th of August?
The city manager and the mayor will set the agenda. I just need the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Hopefully that would be very timely.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, any other, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No, okay. So we'll set that agenda. I'm just concerned about compaction on July 2nd and also on the 16th. So, all right, and any other items? Yes, Councilmember.
I have two items. One of them is to request that staff prepare for us a program description that includes a report back on the internship program, assuming that it will continue to be funding, that includes the objectives of that internship program and reporting back on citywide accomplishment by the interns that are supported through public, our tax dollars. And that is the request.
Okay, is there a second? I'll second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This is a memo, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Is this just a memo or?
No, it's a report back here to council.
Wonderful. Okay.
So was that a yes? Sure. Yes. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. And there was another item?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, can I have a clarification of the last vote? I didn't see
That was 5-0.
That was
5-0,
fine, yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, second request is that the city integrate the Veterans Day Memorial and Flag Retirement Ceremony, an annual event that has a 15-year history among its annual community events.
You want a future, I'm sorry, Mayor, can I just ask a question?
Go ahead.
Currently, I guess we will talk about that in the budget, but are you asking for, when you say integration, are you asking for a budget item? That's what that sounds like to me, but integration can mean a lot of different things. Can you clarify?
Integration would be staff support as well as budgeting for that, and specifically.
Okay.
So that it become an annual event whose key sponsor is the city of Pinole.
Okay, that sounds like a wonderful idea. Would you be willing to just bring that up in the budget conversation this afternoon instead of that being a future item in order for us
I'd
to move?
like the discussion to happen I'd like
I
the
think we
discussion to
can,
happen.
if we move forward, we can have the discussion at the budget, and if we don't get to it, it'll be on the list. Yes.
I just had a clarifying question. Are we saying that becomes a city event?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we would need staff to come back with programming and how that would all, got it, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's clear. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. And Councilmember Tabe, did you have any future agenda
No,
items?
no future item.
Okay,
No.
and I don't either. So we will move forward to city manager report and department staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to, the first thing to start off with and congratulate and recognize Bob Kopp for just another great, successful car show. Great job, Bob. Please thank your team for us, but also just identifying the employees that had to work that day and were there and represented the city very well and just did a great job in coming out on a Sunday. So congratulations, Bob, and also thank you to all the staff that were there to support that. Just a reminder, everybody, to join us on the 4th of July celebration in Pinole Valley High School on the 4th from 6:30 to 9:30. There will be live music, food vendors, children's activities, and a community parade, and also a drone show for the first time this year. So I just want to read an email about why these events are so impactful. We received an email this week about this. Is I'm reaching out to you to inquire about the availability of accommodations at the venue for my 96-year-old mother to come and enjoy the festivities of the 4th of July celebration. Due to her limited mobility, she has mostly been confined at home, and this would be a great opportunity for her to be outside and savor the moment while she still can. Likewise, our family would be grateful for the opportunity to share this moment with her while she can still enjoy the experience. So those are the reasons why that we put these together, and they're so impactful, and I imagine this is just one of many great stories. So I applaud council for approving that this year and giving us the opportunity to present that to the community. So thank you very much. As was the city attorney announced that the city manager selection process has concluded. The selection will be revealed shortly. I know there are some negotiations, and I think July 2nd is when that contract will be ratified. So I want to talk a little bit about the police chief selection process. That's initiated. We hired a nationally recognized group called Public Sector Search to be able to do that for us. Deadlines for applications are July 12th, and we're receiving information from the recruiter that we're getting a lot of interest because of what we're doing here in Pinole. So we're super proud of that and super proud of the opportunity to work for such a great organization in the future. I do want to mention the public comment about that there's a conflict of interest. I don't see that. However, I certainly respect that opinion. It was mentioned from the beginning and the onset of this that our HR director would be heavily involved with that, Stacy Schell, and that we were just going to bring this process forward until there's a selection of a finalist list. The new city manager was always included to make the final selection with or without any input from myself if they wanted. So we're just getting the process started. So when a new city manager comes in, they'll have to wait 3 or 4 months for a new police chief to be selected. So I fail to see the conflict of interest there. And regarding the arrests, I know this is big for our community, the disabling of our communications. Just such a tremendous job by Patrol to be able to go out and catch these copper thieves and these people that are disabling our communications in our community, and just as our community, but it affects the entire county. We arrested 2 subjects the other day for some great police work, and they both were charged with felonies today. So we're super excited about the work that's being done there. And then the other thing is just to mention the torch run tomorrow. It's been an event. It's something that's close to our hearts, the police department, for a very long time. Please come out and support that event. There's information out on our social media where you can meet and be a part of that, or just welcome the torch as it comes into Pinole. So thank you very much for the opportunity to give my city manager report.
Thank you for that report. City Attorney report.
Thank you, Mayor Toms. Nothing to report at this time.
Okay, thank you. All right, so recognitions, presentations, and community events, we have none. So we're going to jump to our consent calendar. We have agenda items 9A through K, a number of items. Is there, do we have any items that council members want to pull?
9A, please.
9A, okay. Is there just a correction?
Yes, just a tiny correction.
Why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. So I am looking at the minutes of June 4th via the packet that was distributed for the June 18th meeting, at which I was ready to be present and meet, but we didn't get to do that. So on page 20, pardon me, page 28 of those minutes, there's mention of a search program. Search, please have it be corrected to CERT, the CERT program. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's it.
Any other items from council? Okay, we'll turn to public comment.
Thank you. Yes, we have Irma Ruport for item 9I, Rafael Menez for items 9A and 9B.
Okay.
Mayor, I just have a couple of questions. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This adoption for the compensation revised for benefits plan, as you guys know, I've said this before, I'm a retired government employee. I've seen these come in the last couple of months. I think this one came February 2024 for other reasons. I'd like to know why the city council adopted this compensation plan, management and employees plan on October 17, 2020. And then every time there's some kind of changes or something, it says staff requires this to recalculate some of these benefits. Are we making mistakes on this stuff? You know, we should have some kind of a salary categories and steps, like increases that we have, and the cost of living calculators. But it seems to me, the irony, we just did something like this in February, and I would like these answered. And how would this affect our current budget? And the last increase, I think, was February 2024. These things I don't understand. I'd like a reason. I do have some human resources background, and it's irony that every time we turn around, there's some compensation plan for employees. You know, is it somebody miscalculating some of this stuff? Thank you. I'd like some answers.
Thank you. And I'll ask staff to be ready to address that when we're finished with public comments.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Rafael Menez. I'm a resident of the city of Pinole. And for item 9A, I have a comment on page 28 of the current agenda packet, page number 22 of the minutes as noted there. It has me stating as, he asked whether it would be better to not force the police department to a 4/10 schedule in order to maintain the potential to deal with a catastrophic fiscal event, which would require 6 months of reserve, or provide a better quality of life for the police department to offset some of the costs imposed on the community, and have a slightly lower reserve, which would have ongoing impacts in the future. Now, I went back and listened to what I actually said in that segment, and between 5 hours, 24 minutes, 18 seconds to 5 hours, 24 minutes, 48 seconds, I said, is it better to make the police department not go to a 4/10 thing in order to maintain the potential to deal with a catastrophic fiscal event that will require 6 months of fiscal reserve? Or is it better to provide a better quality of life for the police to offset some of these costs that would be imposed on the city and have a slightly lower reserve? And this will also have ongoing impacts into the future. Thank you. So what I would like to request is that in the minutes, after the phrase or, between or and provide, add the words, is it better, for clarity, because it's unclear with just the or and not the rest of the phrase there, how the whole structuring goes together. And I wrote to the city clerk before the meeting, and she said I should bring it up in comments, so I'm bringing it up in comments. And that's my comments for 9A. Now, for the warrants, I have a few questions. On page number 45 of the agenda packet, I noticed that for vendor Con 09, the County Fire Protection District, that there's a permit fee for the Pinole Car Show, and I'm curious as to the reason why the city's paying a fee to County Fire for the car show. On page number 47 and extending to 48, I noticed there's a bunch of purchases from Home Depot with just about no information on them other than just citywide purchases for various amounts. Very few of them are over $100, but I think it still might be helpful for the purposes of transparency to have a little bit more detail on those items. On page number 50, with regards to the Myers-Nave expenses, I noted that the amount paid for the MVP Construction LLC dispute was significantly greater than the other line items for that. And I was curious whether that was due to a trial day or increased costs linked to that particular item, or whether there was something else going on there. On page 50 again, there's an entire category for O'Reilly Automotive Incorporated that has a bunch of things that are, again, just citywide purchases with no particular detail. Again, no individual purchase is that large, but it's still pretty unclear just what the purchases are. There was a purchase for $8.98. What was it? Who knows? And on page number 52, I also noted there was an entirely separate subsection for our Redwood Public Law LLP and various fees associated with that. I was curious as to whether there were any overlaps in those fees with the Myers-Nave's fees listed earlier. I'm assuming not by default, but figured I'd ask. And on page number 55, I noticed that for vendor USB 06, US Bank, there was just one entry for citywide credit cards for $33,213.30, with no more detail than that. And I think it might be helpful to have a little bit more detail on a category of that magnitude if it's feasible. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other public comments?
No more public comments.
Okay. There was a question of staff, if I can get a response.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Stacy's able. Are you able to answer that, Stacy? If not, if we need more time, maybe you can. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Schell. I'm the Human Resources Director here at the City of Pinole. With regards to 9I agenda item, the City Council had labor negotiations with the Management and Confidential Group. These revisions to the Management and Confidential Compensation Plan were the result of those labor negotiations. It included a sick leave payout, modifications to a Section 125 flexible spending account, which was due to IRS regulations. And then we also have implementation of a 4% cost of living adjustment. That's to align that bargaining unit with the other bargaining units.
Thank you for that report.
And to add to Stacy's statement regarding the budget, yes, it's accounted for in the budget that has come before the City Council, and it's included in the final proposed budget that will be presented tonight.
Okay, and then Mr. Menace had some questions on the vendor list, the warrants. Is that something that he's able to contact you directly to get answers to, or do you have some response to any of those questions that he had?
Yes, for some of them. I think the ones where he referenced the several line items for specific vendors, Home Depot, for example, O'Reilly, and then also the U.S. Bank citywide credit cards. Those are, we do separate lines based on the department that uses those vendors. So it's basically split out by departments. There is a character limit, so there's only so many details that we can add into those line items. And that's the way that it's paid through our accounts payable system. That's why you see multiple lines there. It's just various departments. We could look at a way to possibly add in the departments, if that would help. But again, there's a character limit, so we would have to figure out how to do that if possible.
And for future, is when the packet comes out, is he able to contact staff to get those questions answered ahead of the meeting?
Yes, he could email me if he like, yes.
All right, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, with that, is there a motion for the consent calendar?
I'll move adoption of the consent calendar, items 9A through 9K, subject to the revisions on item 9A from Councilor Martinez-Rubin and Mr. Menace.
Great. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 5-0. All right, next item, we have no public hearings. We do have old business, and that is item 11A, the final proposed fiscal year 24-25 operating and capital budget. And we have Finance Director Guillory and also Public Works Director, oh, he's on standby. Okay, thank you.
Good evening again. So for this item, I'll walk through the final proposed budget for the fiscal year 2024-25. Next slide. For this item, staff is recommending that the City Council adopt a resolution approving the budget for the fiscal year 2024-25, which will go into effect on July 1st of 2024, and to provide direction to staff on any amendments to the final proposed budget. Next slide. So some of the budget highlights are that the general fund baseline budget is now balanced, and we'll look at some of the strategies that were instituted to balance the budget. It now reflects a small surplus of just over $40,000. The budget also includes a transfer from the city's general reserve in the amount of $514,000, and this reduces the reserve level from 50% down to 45%. The budget also includes the use of unassigned fund balance, and this is to fund one-time operating items as well as several capital improvement projects. And lastly, the budget, if the City Council does direct any additions to the budget, we would ask that you also provide recommendations on where to cut in other areas just to keep the budget in a structurally balanced position. Next slide. So looking at the overall budget, it is composed of three different components. We're looking at a budget of around $37 million. The ongoing baseline budget is $27.8 million, and our one-time operating items are about $903,000. Capital improvement projects total just over $8 million. So this budget does include the usage of fund balance in the amount of $8.9 million. Next slide. So this is just an overview of the baseline budget, and as I mentioned earlier, it does have a small surplus of about $40,000. I won't go through each category, but it is made up of our major tax sources, including our property tax, sales tax, utility users, franchise tax, and our intergovernmental, as well as some department-generated revenues in terms of the charges for services, mostly in the Public Works Department, and then other revenues that we receive for licenses, permits, and fees. We also have our transfer in from the pension trust in the amount of $2.4 million to offset the rise in costs for the city's contribution to the pension system, or CalPERS. And we also have a transfer in from the general reserve, giving us a total of $27.9 million in revenues in our general fund baseline budget. For the expenditures, the largest expenses are the salaries and wages, as well as benefits. And then we have other departmental operating costs, such as in our professional services, other operating, our materials and supplies, and so on. It should also be noted that our professional services category does include the contract with ComFire for the fire services. Next slide. So during the last City Council meeting, the Council went through the 6% and the 10% reductions that were presented by the various city departments, and directed staff on a number of specific reductions to institute to help balance the budget. Those are listed here on the screen. They're also included in the staff report, so I won't go through each one, but just wanted to provide an overview of those strategies that were included in this budget. Next slide. As we can see here, the total reductions amounted to $1.4 million, thereby closing the $1.3 million original shortfall that the city was facing. Next slide. And then again, this is just a list of our one-time operating budget items. These are not a part of the baseline budget. These are funded by one-time sources, and that one-time source being the unassigned fund balance in the main general fund, as well as the Measure S 2006 and the Measure S 2014. Next slide. And this is just a continuation of those items. These are the capital improvement projects that are also funded by general fund unassigned fund balance. This is not an exhaustive list of all of the capital improvement projects because those that are funded by other sources are not included here, but are included in the capital improvement plan. Next slide. So looking at our fund balance summary, our baseline budget is balanced. So the $40,465, the small surplus that we see there, will be added to the general fund unassigned fund balance. The budget does include the use of unassigned fund balance. So we're estimating to begin the next fiscal year with a balance of $9.5 million. We're expecting to use about $8.9 million, leaving an estimated fund balance in the unassigned general fund of $553,000. And then just an overview of the general reserve. After the transfer of $514,000, we're projecting just over $10 million in the general reserve at year end. And then lastly, our pension trust, we're estimating a balance of $11.7 million at the end of fiscal year 2024-25. Next slide. So the next steps would be for the City Council to adopt the final proposed budget tonight by resolution. It will go into effect on Monday, July 1st, and also to direct staff on any budget adjustments that we would make after this meeting. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. I wanted to start off with a question either for you or for Commander Crone. At the last meeting, there were positions that were frozen, officer positions, 2 police officer and the vacant sergeant position. Yes. But I wanted to find out where in the process. I understand that they're vacant now, but I'm wondering how long have they been vacant, and are you already in the process of filling those positions?
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you, Council, staff. So the current vacant positions have been vacant on a kind of a rotational basis based on the rise and fall of staffing levels. We had a couple retirements this last year, so which opened up some of those vacancies. We've had ongoing and continual recruitment, both in lateral and academy grad for applicants, as well as officer trainees. Currently, we have one officer in backgrounds with a conditional job offer, and is ready to be hired as soon as they complete a couple steps. And then we also have another candidate identified that's in our process now, as well as ongoing interviews and recruitment processes.
Okay, thank you for that. And then question for Director Guillory or Director Mishra. At the last meeting, there were portions of FTEs, full-time employees, for Public Works that were frozen, and a portion from the general funds were cut. If we removed the word freeze from that, does that allow you then to, if you're able to identify other non-general fund revenues to pay for those employees, would that solve an issue if you were able to say if there's gas tax money or something else that would help pay for that? Would amending the words on that to remove the words freeze do it, but still take the revenue away? Does that leave you more options?
So The two positions are already allocated, so the amounts that are in the staff report is just the general fund portion. So for the capital improvement project manager, for example, the 40,000 that's reflected in the table, that's the general fund portion. The rest of that position is allocated out to other sources, including gas tax and some of the other CIP funds. And the same is true for the associate civil engineer. The 87,000 though is funded by general fund, with the remainder going to other funds.
Right, right. But I'm wondering if we had a motion where we just, where we don't fund it, but we also don't freeze it, does that leave options open for you to, if there's some grant program where, we can get some of those funded?
I think it's possible because we have a couple of grant-funded projects. We could reassign those funds to actually fund it through the project itself.
Okay.
And that is possible, yes.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you for indulging my questions. I'm going to turn to Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Toms. I did have a clarifying question for Commander Crone, if I may. And so the two sworn officer positions, those are in process. You said one applicant had a conditional offer, and I sorry, I lost you on the second one there.
Yes, so one does have a conditional offer. The other is a candidate we've identified that's a viable candidate that's met our initial process and has passed that process.
Got it. And then for the sergeant position, where is PD in the process for hiring?
So in our budget proposal, our budget that we proposed at the beginning of this process, we proposed that sergeant position actually become an officer position to support the movement to the 410 plan. So that was part of our original budget. Obviously same FTE allocation, but just simply moving that position.
Understood. Thank you. And I have a question for Director Mishra on the two public works positions. So one of them is the CIP manager, projects manager position. The second one is the vacant associate civil engineer position. So I'm really curious, and practically, how does this impact services to the community, and how can we see maybe the CIP and the projects there being impacted by not having, particularly a CIP manager?
So essentially, the CIP manager position being vacant for a while, it actually is, the CIP program you see right now, it was very hard to put together. I had to get consultants, a part-time consultant to help me, which affects all other works, and it's a burdensome just to carry forward without a CIP manager here. So that would affect, if that position is being frozen, that would actually affect current projects which are online and we are progressing through it. Those projects will be delayed. We could lose grant funding. We may not be able to fund our reimbursement requests. There's a lot of that actually goes into running the current projects, and CIP manager helps with that. And also that portion of responsibility is all the environmental compliance, the stormwater compliance, and all those. This position actually is under that duty. And those things could fall apart, and we could be in a position that where we're fined by the regulatory authorities but not complying to various reports and all that. And for the associate engineer position, we have a pretty robust CIP list that we put together for this fiscal year. We wanted to take up some new projects. Our residents demand for those road rehab projects and all that. We could have taken some of those, and that the new projects would have been the responsibility of the associate engineer. And the private sewer lateral program, the sidewalk program, those are the new projects that we're trying to do, and that would actually, is a lot of requests from the community. And without that associate engineer position, it will be very hard for us to do those new projects.
Got it. And to clarify, it will impact the start of new projects, but not ongoing projects that we have.
Yes, meaning if I have the CIP manager position there, I can continue the current projects, but I won't be able to start any new projects. That will delay. And with the associate engineer position being filled, that can help me start the new projects that we're trying to do.
Understood, and thank you. And my thoughts are just, you look at the line items in the presentation, the CIP project manager position was $40,170, but it's because it's, the source of the funding is split between general fund and another source. And then what is the other source, Director Guillory?
Are you asking for the associate civil engineer or the
For-
CIP?
For both,
the-
if you have the information.
The CIP manager, it
Yes.
is the sewer enterprises one,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
the stormwater fund, and then the solid waste fund, and Measure J.
So multiple sources.
Yes, multiple.
Thank you for that question. Looking at our very small surplus that we have on, for this proposed budget, and it's $40,465. So it'd be great to just fund that position at least with the surplus we have.
Yes.
And my last question I have, Director Guillory, is I have concerns that every single year we're going to have a budget shortfall, unless we have a new stream of revenue, and we are planning on having a ballot measure in November for a half-cent sales tax. A lot of the reason why we're experiencing this is because it's our expenditures are steadily going steadily increasing, but the the revenues are steadily increasing, but the expenditures have been increasing substantially. And so I just want to confirm that's because of CalPERS contributions, cost of living adjustments, benefits, health insurance costs, and is all that tied to bringing in more full-time employees to the city? Or just having
No,
full-time
it's growth because we haven't added to the head count. It's been pretty steady the last couple of years following the reorganization. It's just the costs are growing. For instance, CalPERS experienced losses in its investments, and that in turn goes back to the agencies within that system to pick up those costs. So we saw a significant increase. As a matter of fact, it was around 20%, close to $700,000 increase just in 1 year from the prior or the current fiscal year to next fiscal year.
Okay.
So that is a large driving factor in that those are why expenditures are outpacing the growth in revenues.
Mm-hmm. And so if we fund and hopefully fill all the vacancies that we have right now, would that aggravate the problem of those ongoing expenditures that have been increasing?
Well, they were included in the budget already,
would not-
right? So we decided to freeze them in order to balance the budget. So no, not necessarily, because again, it's still a part of the baseline budget. If we're going to add those back in tonight, then we need to take away from somewhere else, obviously. But no, it doesn't really add to that problem that we're seeing in some of those non-discretionary costs.
For sure. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Murphy, any questions?
No questions for me. Thank you
Okay.
for answering all my questions last time and getting us to this point, both of you.
Okay, Councilmember Martinez-Rubin.
I'd like us to consider, Director Guillory, when you say take away funds from somewhere, it could be somewhere that isn't currently presented on the table here that reads budget balancing strategies, right? It would require that we go back to the budget and take a look at what had been proposed.
Yes.
At the last meeting that we were going to,
If
or we
that's
were going to
the
hear.
council's
Okay.
direction, yes.
Okay. Alternatively, we could also shift funds from this table. And that wouldn't change the total, but at least it would, it might reflect what is actually going to be doable in this next fiscal year. Okay, thank you, because I have some thoughts about that.
Okay, Councilmember Tave.
I just had one question from our previous agenda, and kind of going with the statements that were made earlier regarding the police officers and the positions. So right now we have it says the recommendation previously in the report was freeze one or more of the 5 vacant positions that are currently there. Am I to understand that, Commander Crone, we had 2 positions that are currently in process and 3 that are where the recommendation previously. I just want to kind of make sure that
Can you just, I know it's difficult sometimes, but can you just re-answer that so I can better understand it?
Sorry, there was a comment here that we have 2 individuals that are in process for 5 vacant positions. And the recommendation last meeting was 3 frozen positions, a sergeant and 2 officers. Does that affect the 2 coming in? That doesn't sound like that would go forward, right?
I think ultimately, yes, it would affect that. If you're saying if you're going by the recommendation was the 2 frozen and the 1 sergeant, that was the recommendation at the last council meeting.
Right.
So it only affects it because we have an ongoing recruitment process, which means we've done interviews, but we wouldn't label them as somebody that are in our background process, if that makes sense.
I see. So you were interviewing for 5 and selecting 2 and recommending 3 to meet the budget.
So just to clarify, so we have like an ongoing recruitment process, so we don't start and end recruitments is ongoing. So when we see an applicant that comes through that we want to interview, we initiate interviews throughout the year. So there's not a single process.
Got
so
it.
at any day, we may be interviewing 3 or 4 people, and then we have people. So right now, as we see somebody who meets the criteria, we send them into background. So those 2 people we're talking to one's in backgrounds with a conditional already, ready to be hired. The other person is ready to start backgrounds. But we're currently have already done interviews, and we're in the selection process, if you will, if that makes sense.
I see. And the recommendations that are being put forth today represent that balance that was recommended the last meeting. Just want to make sure that that's correct.
Yes, I think that's correct.
Okay. Financially, it meets balanced budget.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. That was the question. Sorry. Thanks. I know it was a long meeting, the last meeting, but I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. We'll go ahead and open it up to the public.
Thank you, Mayor. We have several cards for in-person. I'll start with Debbie Long, followed by Irma Ruport, then Rafael Menes.
Good evening again. A lot of information here tonight. But in reviewing the budget, I've drawn the conclusion that as a city is no longer working for us. We are working for the city. This council has a spending problem as reflected in the numbers from the fiscal year 2021 to the proposed budget for the fiscal year 24-25. My analysis is based upon the presentation from June 4th. Removing the fire salaries and the benefits from the 2021 budget, since they are now a part of contract for all funds, the total salaries and benefits was $14,219,000 in 2021. In comparison, for the proposed 24 budget, the total for both is $23,841,000, with the difference being $9,622,000, or a 68% increase in 4 years. And there were other people hired within that period of time. Another example of overspending is the unaccountability in the council budget. There's $30,000 for stipends for internships, which I think can readily be taken out. Discretionary spending that totals $21,850, of which Councilman Murphy has spent over $7,000, or 33%, without any accountability to the taxpayer of spending that money. And another $15,000 is appropriated to the council for office furniture. This totals $66,850. Compared to when I left council, this is a 101.25% increase. I would suggest that they reduce their discretionary spending back to $7,500. So, just off the top of my head, there's all sorts of different expenditures, but I would like to say that now the fire department's budget, you can't touch it because it's by contract. You should show that same respect to our police department and not touch their budget at all. Crime is on the uptake. It's very knowing that the community is very in tune to that. Look at the amended Proposition 47 that's going to be on the council. And I'd venture to say that any person here that is not respectful of the police department budget and their needs might have a tough time in the polls this time in November. Also, just another example of the council majority, I will say, of not understanding what they were doing. It was $150,000 that they spent on severance package, or it could have been a little bit more, for the city manager. But in January of 2023, they approved his contract. And then in September, they remove him. Maybe it was August. I think whatever was going on then was going on in January. And that was a simple matter of this council majority not understanding what a budget is. So that's all I can say, obviously. Thank you.
Irma Report, followed by Rafael Menez, and then Amy Eubanks.
Good evening, Mayor, again. How lucky we are about having not our institutional memory has gone here. Some of the former council members and politicians that were here when we had the recession, half of the staff had to be furloughed, retired. We didn't have the money. Half the staff was gone, and the services went down. You remember that? Let's call the history of what it is. They were here when that happened, and all I want to say is, when you throwing this agenda to the new council members that are here, let's remember something. They're doing the best they can. They inherited the mess that we have and have had, and throwing all these darts, and let's put the information out. Let's put the accountability of everybody that's been prior as politicians here. I don't mind it. I'll put it out myself if I have to. But one thing I do want to say, Mayor, regarding this budget, I would look at every department's recruitment and numbers of employees. There's some that are lacking, some have grown. And I do see the police department down 3 officers. Why, how, when, and where? I mean, let's go there. All this is history-based. Let's look at each council member in the past who had a lot to do with our mess that we're in and prior messes, okay? We didn't believe in grants. We didn't believe in other resources. And here we are in this mess that we're in. I totally think that we need to revisit some of these issues and budgets. Department heads need to be a little more strict with what they have. Come on, everybody, we're on this mess. We're on this together. If some of you want jobs next year, let's get it together and let's start thinking hard as to how we can all get together and find solutions. All this throwing back and forth, yes, some of the old timers are here, but you know what? You remember those days when we had some bad times here. And you know what? Maybe those lessons need to be brought up today so we can learn from them. Okay, thank you.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Rafael Menez. I'm a resident of Pinole, and I have several points to make on this item tonight. Let's see whether I can make it through all of them in 3 minutes. So first off, I wanted to highlight that if the city wants to reverse the proposed freezing of the police department positions, it would need to find about $560,000 somewhere in the budget. Now, if we cross-compare to I believe it was the June 4th budget that had the most recent data points, most of the 10% cut areas that were provided, and you can see the 10% cuts on pages, let's see. From page 312 of that agenda packet to page number 315. There are relatively few cuts that could reach that level. The main ones would be in the non-departmental reduction of operating subsidies, which, as was noted at a prior meeting, would have significant detrimental impacts on staffing in the community services and recreation department. Or The city's already taken the freezing of the various public works departments. It can't do the options listed for fire. It's already done a lot of the freezing for travel and other services across the various other departments. So the most likely option would either be massive cuts to other departments, or more likely, I would think, going back into reserves and dropping from 45% of reserves and down to 40% and making it more explicitly clear to the community that if the sales tax measure doesn't pass in November, then in order to rebuild the reserves, the city is going to need to freeze those police department positions. And I think it might be better, strategically speaking, for the city to structure it that way for a few different reasons. First, because the public opinion from the city's survey report was, broadly speaking, in favor of not making cuts to the police department. So like 57% said no cuts whatsoever, and another 9% said further comments, and the vast majority of the comments listed there were, again, not in favor of making those cuts. And secondly, because it's easier to say, let's work to keep something that we want to have rather than let's bring something back that we cut, if that makes any sense. Thank you.
Okay, Amy Eubanks, president of the PEA. I'm going to reiterate the survey, and I'm just going to express to everybody that this survey was generated at the direction of Mr. Murphy. And that survey, like many of the people here have said already, was an overwhelming support of not cutting services to the police budget. So again, I'm going to say 58% of community members do not want to lower any part of the police budget. 61% do not want to lower the police support services budget. And 66% do not want to lower the police dispatch budget. With that being said, I understand that the allocated amount for the frozen positions is a lot, including our pensions and benefits. I propose that the council looks into dipping into that reserve fund. I understand that the proposal that's been brought forth puts us at a 45%. I still don't see an issue with that dropping further down to 30%, which is the average of many cities in what they keep in their reserve. Now, I understand the history of Pinole and the financial situations that our city has been in may lead the council to keep a higher reserve, and I understand that. I understand the financial difficulties, but our citizens want the police department staffed, plain and simple. The cuts to the police department, the cuts to fire, that should never be something that is considered when balancing a budget for a city. That's all.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Peter Murray.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor and council members, for letting me speak on this matter. My first thought was the survey, which I took, and I was trying to figure out if it was for the ballot measure that may come up soon, or if it was for your budget discussions coming up tonight and everything. And the thing that kind of annoyed me the most was it's always police and fire, that gets put up for cuts right off the bat. Number one, bam. Here we are, and I thought, well, okay, is this the setup for the tax measure, so that everybody gets scared and all of that? But as noted tonight, police and fire are your primary, obligations for the city to keep us safe, and so I just find it real difficult that you're going to try to shave the budget, and the future of our public safety. The other thing was the reserves, and that bothers me because I've had a lot of experience with reserves. Reserves are extremely difficult to grow. So when you say that, we're going to drop it down to 40 and we'll rebuild it, and I heard that tonight, it's like, that's not going to happen because you're in a crisis right now, and your crisis is only going to be exacerbated come 3 years from now when the fire contract is up and you get hit with that across across your heads. And you're going to have to make a big decision then too, and that's going to cost a bundle of money that you didn't you didn't take into consideration of locking it down tighter than a drum so that we wouldn't be exposed to those additional costs. That's the future. So I cannot see that we're going to be in any better position going down the road any year from now until that contract is up. And when you take and you spend the reserves, you've got to remember, we live on the Hayward Fault. $10 million is nothing when it comes to going about, facing a disaster and covering the costs for that. And Pinole's a small city, and we don't have a lot to draw from outside of what we built for the reserves. And the other thing is that we did have the reserves also for the employees' benefit. The smoothing reserve, to cover the state's bumps that were coming. And I know that's been spent down faster than we had anticipated when we built that reserve. So when you start talking about where the reserves are going, they're going, and it's all the funds are being kind of touched. And when I saw that the last time, I was upset about that because that money was supposed to be considered just for the employees' benefits. And I believe that we've been spending it willy-nilly on other things. So with that being said, thank you, and good luck with the budget. It put some good effort into it, but I think that it's going to continue to bite you coming forward. And try not to touch the reserves. The disaster's coming one day at a time. It's getting closer.
I don't believe we have any other comments. Okay, thank you.
Any online? Okay. We'll bring it back to the council and, for discussion. Do I want to start with Councilmember Martinez-Rubin?
Oh, okay, thank you. I'll do an easy thing here. Taking a look at the at what was presented as a summary, the budget balancing strategies, what I would say we could do to fund the capital improvement projects manager position, 40,000 and some out of the general budget, is to reduce elsewhere, again on that same table. So the city council at this point has an allocation of $10,000 for a city council retreat planning workshop. I would say let's reduce that to half. That gives us $5,000. The city manager's office has DEI consulting at this point, $40,000. I say let's reduce that to $20,000. That gives us $25,000. And the police department has CERT program supplies at $20,000. And I believe that CERT program has not begun. Please correct me. Yeah, and it's not likely that it's going to be I don't believe it's going to be a priority next year either. So that now we have $45,000 that we could in turn use to increase the amount that's currently allocated to the capital improvement projects manager position. Yes, and that would allow us to continue some of the projects that are already programmed, if you will, in the CIP.
Okay, and just if we can go back to which page, which item numbers you're on?
I'm looking at the handout that we received today, and I'm looking at the table that starts, has a header, budget balancing strategies.
Okay.
Okay, and there are entries numbered 7 through 12 on the page that I'm looking at.
Okay.
And we see as number 8, Public Works freezing the vacant capital improvement projects manager position, which is a patchwork of funding from different sources, is what I understand. So at this point, it's funded at $40,178. And I am suggesting that we take from other allocations on the following page to increase that amount. And where I am suggesting is, oh, I just realized something. That may not
It's
work.
one time.
They're one time. Oh, my goodness. Okay. So for members of the public here, and this is what we ran into at the last two council meetings where we talk about budget, it's so tempting to look at the allocations for one-time operating budgets, but that does not help us address the structural deficit in the general fund. Okay. I still want to be able to do something about moving some of those funds, though, because they could go into the unassigned fund balance to be used elsewhere at another time later in the year. So, but that's not tonight's conversation. Okay.
But the other piece of that is, you know, there has been discussion about taking some of the funds from the reserves. That also is one time. So if you preserve the reserve but reduce these one time, you know, we end up still having the reserve, or, you know, that amount of the reserve.
If I understood you, Mayor Toms, we reduce the amounts in the one-time budgets, we can then use that to replenish the reserve?
Not to replenish, but to avoid using that much of the reserves.
Okay. If indeed that is doable, I'm turning to our city finance director to see if indeed that is doable, then my discovery of $45,000, as little as it may be, we could use that then in
Okay, and then I'm looking at the page that you were referring to, and the DEI consulting, I see that there's 40,000. You were proposing to cut that in half?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The city council retreat planning workshop, reduced that to $5K. And then the search program supplies, do away with altogether. That's $20,000 there. So that's really just $45,000 found or moved around somehow.
I want to make sure I've got those. So the city council retreat, DEI.
And CERT.
And CERT.
Supplies.
Okay. And change that to 0. And if I can add to that, the EOP training citywide, that's offered for free by our County Office of Emergency Services. So I would suggest that also.
That gives us an additional $20,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I still have the floor, those are just little amounts. The bigger conversation, I think, is about going back to reserves. Finance Director Guillory, can you review for us the policy around related to the use of our reserve account, the general reserve account? What it is intended to do, and why we might draw from it in such times as we might find ourselves, not only because of some emergency due to Mother Nature that hopefully we won't experience. There's always a possibility, and we cannot necessarily forecast the probability. Two different things. Okay.
Right. And just to add to that, the city has insurance as well that would kick in for natural disasters and such too, just to keep that in mind. But going back to your question, so the policy uses, I believe, the term financial distress, so we could withdraw from the general reserve, which is a pretty broad term, right? Because what do we consider financial distress? So it doesn't include that metric or what the magnitude of such a circumstance would be, but it does say that we could use funding in times of economic distress, basically, and it does say that we will work toward replenishing the fund as soon as possible. So in the upcoming fiscal year is ideal, according to the policy. If we needed to build it up over time, the city council could, at its discretion, do so, but the policy does say that we should strive to replenish it in the subsequent fiscal year.
Okay. Additional to those comments, in last year's budget, there was also mention about having a plan to replenish our general reserve, I believe. I recall somewhere in there, there's one fund or maybe a few funds where we need to do that. And so at the next meeting, I will make a request that we have those kinds of discussions about replenishing. Thank you, Director Guillory. I think what also has come up here on the dais in the past couple of meetings we've had is the anticipation that we might have the passage of a measure to increase sales tax. However, it takes some time to actually obtain those funds. If indeed that measure passes in November, then it means that it would take effect beginning of the year. And then actually seeing any funds coming to us would probably be later in the fiscal year. So I don't want us to count on that money. It's as though, imagine any one of us having the desire for a $15 lunch, but we only have $10 in our pocket. We don't have that additional $5, so we do without, and we take an alternative approach and we eat something different. Knowing that we do need to eat, and my analogy is such that we do need to provide essential services, and among those essential services are safety, both for provided by the police department as well as by our fire services now in contract with Confire. So I would like us to consider the use of the reserves to meet the cost of the positions that in the police department were previously presented when department heads presented to the council a decrease in their own department budgets to 6%. And I believe I was trying to find the pages where that was presented. Those were tables that we were presented with, I believe, 2 meetings ago. And I was trying to follow the discussion earlier about what's in process, who's being recruited, what's funded, what isn't funded. I would just like us to just start clean and think about not having any of the positions in the police department frozen, but keeping them in our budget. And to pay for those to draw from the general reserve.
Okay, is that a motion?
Sure, consider that a motion.
So your motion is for items number 9 and 10 on the budget presentation, which total, it's the $203,831 for the sergeant and $356,472 for the 2 police officer positions, and that would come out of reserves.
Yes.
Okay, and I'll second that. Is there any further discussion on that?
I'd like to have discussion.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very narrow right now.
Okay, do you want to start? Or Councilmember Tave, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd like to get a better understanding of the 5 positions. I know that this 5 positions was approved at the last fiscal year, right? So that has been something in our budget that we've been carrying. Have those positions been filled? I guess, have we ever been fully staffed is the question. Have we had those 5 positions filled before?
I understand this to be 3 positions.
I'm sorry, but the previous recommendation was 5 positions for the staff to be full. Is that correct?
So in my tenure as the police chief, we were fully staffed for a very short amount of time. We had a lot of recruitment challenges, but council and HR has worked really well of getting salaries back to a level that made us attractive, and they also did a great job with an incentive with recruitment bonuses and things like that. So our recruitment is on the rise. In fact, I think that we're about at one point almost 5% vacancy, which is extremely low in this area. So, but yes, we were fully staffed that way, just a short time.
So my point is, and for the discussion, it's very hard to balance competitive salaries and retention, as well as an increase in make sure that we're not having people work 15-hour, 16-hour days. At this point, we are in a transition period. I mean, this measure is very important for November, and I think that with the recommendation that was made in the previous meeting, that, and I said this before, like I initially, when I had made the reductions, I asked for 3%, and then the directors to go back, figure out their budget so that we leave it to the professionals to balance what's important, right? If it's salaries, we all agreed that salary increase was to make Pinole a lot more attractive for our staff, right? Or for staff coming in. There's a balance there, meaning that there's 5 positions that are vacant, and we can afford currently, with the 5% reduction in our reserve, I believe 2 of the 5, which was recommended. We're on a short window. I think that come July 1st to January 1st, we're going to have about 5 months to have this discussion again during mid-year. By then, we're going to know a lot more information on where we are. And if that decision starts to become, and to one of the speakers' point, it's going to be a difficult conversation if the measure doesn't pass. If the measure passes and we start to really evaluate all the departments across, we might be seeing, worse streets. The sewer program, we might have another sewer break. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen, right? But I think that it's to fully fund currently with one-time use of funding, and hope November we're going to be hiring people and then telling them right away, hey, look, sorry, this isn't going to work, right? Because you need money to pay people for work. And so I just feel like it's an overextension to go that far into our reserve. It's hard enough going 5% into the reserve, in my mind, just from my take, because I do know that previous councils worked very hard to build that reserve up. And I don't want the public to feel like this is something that we're doing on a whim. There are several things that are happening that are leading us to better service. And I think January, we're going to have a very clear position on where we are and where Pinole's going. And then I think we should have that discussion then. I think to go for 5,000 here, 20,000 here, 30,000 here, I don't, that still doesn't meet the 500,000 that we need for the additional officers. I just feel like at this point, we've made some good decisions based on the information we have. I think that the recommendations that were put forward do show an effort to try to balance things, and we should have a better discussion in January. And the voters will tell us, yes, they'd like to see an increase in our funding just for all the services, the roads, everything that we have going. Or they'll say no, and we have to come back here and make decisions. So I don't want to spend all night talking about, every single line item. I don't think that's our job. Our job is to provide direction and let staff do their jobs.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Murphy?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I'm definitely don't want to spend all night. We spent the last meeting doing that, so I feel like the work has been done already to do that. I'm glad we have new ideas, but I do think we have gotten to the point where we have narrowed down what we need to do. So a couple things. I think the mentioning of our work to get here is really important. In 2020, when I started this council, we had, of course, what many of us know, a COVID-19 pandemic in front of us. We were able to give several different COVID-19 business support grants. We obviously enhanced our citywide communications in efforts to not only talk about issues of public health, but also talk about issues of infrastructure and other issues that people were dealing with. And I want to name those things in light of the fact that we are here today, also acknowledging that we have, in some ways, moved past probably the peak of that COVID-19 pandemic, and we are still dealing with it, in some ways, an emergency. When I say emergency, I'm saying the emergency of what many of us who follow the budget know is that, again, our expenses have highly increased for many reasons, including us providing as a council competitive salaries to our staff while we don't have additional revenue as much. We have consistently been supportive of initiatives from different departments that, from my perspective, and I've assumed most of the council, because most of the council has voted on most of these initiatives, have built resiliency for this city. Last council meeting, I was a little upset. Of course, I was one sole vote that did not vote to increase or decrease the reserve. After reflection, I would say to the council that I am supportive of that. I also, at the same time, still hold those values of why I struggle with reducing the reserve tonight. For those of you who made public comment, I thank you always for making comments. I feel like I've been a huge advocate for public engagement, whether it's virtual or in person. I do want to name that my intent, whether folks feel comfortable with that or not, is really to preserve jobs and to save jobs long term. So I really want folks to think about tonight, where we are at tonight, because it's a long haul ahead. I say that also to say, as the council member who really encouraged us to not just have a 5-year forecast, but turn that into a 10-year and 20-year forecast, this is not a conversation that started tonight, and certainly not a conversation that started this year. I have at least, and I think the council has at least been talking about this for at least 4 years in a 10-year, 20-year time frame. So I wanted to just say and really acknowledge that I appreciate sentiments tonight. I also want us to be very concerned and stern about the resiliency of our city long term, and that is going to either require sacrifice, whether it is sacrificing in this perspective of freezing position, or whether it's a long-term sacrifice that we don't see today because there's not a ballot measure that passes in November. And so, again, those of you who are in the room, many folks are employees in the room, but also many folks are residents in the room. Think about the type of advocacy, budget advocacy we need. I understand that folks are frustrated, and that's okay. I think every emotion is okay. We have a right to our emotions. We also, I think more importantly, should be working collaboratively to move the city forward. And that, of course, for me, includes preserving our current jobs, our current jobs that we have. It's easier to tell someone who doesn't have a job in the city of Pinole, you won't get a job. It's harder for me to tell somebody who has a job currently that they no longer have a job. And so I just want to name that, because that could be a reality, given that we are starting to, in some ways, break a precedent. And I just want to name that, right? The reduction of a reserve from 5% is 5% today, or could be, I guess, depending upon the council's decision. It could be 40% next year, and then 35% the year after that. And what we do know, if you haven't watched, again, is that we have a 10-year and 20-year forecast that demonstrates both a need to have additional revenue, but some challenges that we have along the budget. It's not because of our fire contract that we are having this issue. We have actually secured $2 million a year for that contract. And that was from a different revenue source. We have consistently innately really develop a grant management and research strategy where we have sought and continue to seek many different grant opportunities, whether it's in community development or whether it's in public works. And we've also had several different assessments. So I wanted to name those things because I know that oftentimes emotions get really high. And that's okay. Again, that's okay for folks to have emotions. I honor those emotions. I also want folks to recognize that from my perspective, my passion, whether it's in this meeting or has been from the last meeting where I felt like I perhaps drove a lot of the conversation, is really is two things: to build resiliency for the city and to protect the jobs that we have. So I'm just going to say again that if you're in this room or if you're watching, I'm with you. And so I'm looking forward to having more conversations, because this is only one of many budgets and budget reviews that we'll go through. But I also want you to, if possible, challenge yourself, like I will challenge myself, to see a way for us to perhaps not make strong claims to say no cuts whatsoever, but how might we create a city that actually has resiliency if we care about the priorities we have in our city, if we care about public works, if we care about policing, if we care about community development. It's going to more than likely take more than a statement at the podium or even a statement at this dais for us to move that forward. And it's actually going to take a collective group responsibility to not only pass one measure, but also seek other additional revenue sources. So I just want to say I am fully supportive of the staff recommendation or the proposal that has been developed tonight. It is not one that I like. It is one that I am content of. So I thank you, Director Guillory, for your professionalism and for getting us to this point. I know I've had several questions, including the one Councilmember Martinez-Rubin asked. I think I asked that about 10 times. So I know that we are getting to the point where we're seeking, we need a space to seek new ideas, but you've been such a, again, an incredible professional and very brilliant in facilitating the direction of this council during a very difficult time. Director Mishra, thank you also for your answering of questions. I really want to honor the work that you've done in some challenging times, as well as we try to upgrade our professional public works department. And so I do just want to say again, I'm grateful for this work. It's not the best budget that I think any of us want, but it is what we need right now. And I just want to say, as a last thing, is hold tight, folks. Like we are in the process of both budget review constantly, even if this budget is approved, but we are also looking and constantly looking for new forms of revenue. And they're out there. There's a lot of money. We live in one of the most wealthy countries in this world. And so it is possible for us to grow, but I also don't want us to have a sense of moral panic that gets us dividing against each other and not recognizing that, you know, the decisions that we make may not be comfortable in the moment, but they actually are here to push us through and protect each and every one of us, especially our staff long term. So that's my commentary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And again, we're speaking on the motion. And
that is on the motion.
Okay.
And yes, want to address the motion on the floor. I would not be supportive of going through the budget again line by line. We spent a lot of time in the last meeting going line by line. We made some significant cuts. City Council budget 10%, City Attorney budget 10%, HR I believe 10% as well, and Public Works, all these different departments, we've made massive cuts, and that did not even balance the budget. We still had to take from development reserve to balance the budget and then some. My worry and my uncomfortability right now is making decisions on this budget and in terms of staffing as well, with a big question mark, and the question mark being the ballot measure that is up for this November. And the polling looks really, really good, but things could happen. And as my colleagues mentioned, it would be a very, very difficult conversation to have in the mid-year adjustment when it does not pass, God forbid. So my thoughts right now are, I would not be supportive of line-by-line cuts at this moment. We've done a lot of that, but you know, I empathize with a lot of the public comments here tonight, and I thank you all for it. It's also my experience, right? You know, I drive a family member to work every single day, 5:30 in the morning, to the Hercules Transit Center, go through San Pablo Avenue. I live in the Pinole Shores area. I cannot tell you how many times that I've driven there in the Old Town area, and I see a truck or another driver driving 20 past the speed limit, and I don't see them pulled over. And that is a death waiting to happen. I know I talk with interim city manager a lot about his worst fear in this community, which is a shooting. And God forbid that doesn't happen, but it has happened in our backyard. It's not happening in the Midwest, where there's less gun regulations. It's also happening here in California. And so I want to make sure that we balance the long-term fiscal sustainability of the city, making sure we don't have to furlough and don't have to lay off folks, but also making sure that we uphold public safety. That is of concern to all of us here. I think we're all vocalizing that. And so I want to empathize with all of those experiences and make sure that we really take action as a budget as a reflection of our values and a reflection of our needs in this community. So I do want to make a substitute motion. And City Clerk Bell, please clarify that a substitute motion takes precedent in the floor, and we have to vote on that before the initial motion. Or City Attorney Casher.
Through the chair. So we currently have a motion, and we have a second.
We have a motion and a second, and I haven't had a chance to make comments on it.
Okay, so I think we need to take comments on all the motion, on the existing motion, and then we could entertain the moving council member can entertain, there can be an entertaining of substitute motion at that time, once all the comments have been made. And let me confer with the city clerk on just procedurally the vote of how that works.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so the reason I am supportive of the motion, and that is to unfreeze these 3 police officer positions and use reserves, is because a lot of the reserves were built up using Measure S money that were deemed for public safety. And this is a time where it is needed. Yes, I do understand that it's one time, but we have 2 major things that are going to be happening between now and November. And that is, we're going to have a new city manager on board that can dig into and really dig into the budget and really give us some structure as far as where we're going to go. We will know what a balance or what the ballot measure, if it's successful or not, and then we're going to have an opportunity for mid-year adjustments. But if we lose the possibility of 2 recruitments that are very close to being hired, that's very difficult for a public agency to recruit police officers, and we have that possibility right now to do that. There's constant changes, so it's not like we're going to get to January and we would have layoffs. We do know that there's movement of staff between other other organizations. Unfortunately, we do lose staff. So that's why I think that this is, it's not ideal. It's only a Band-Aid for 1 year. But there's a lot of things that we'll be working on in the coming year to address this. I'm also remembering that this is what, this was a primary issue that the public wanted to see when we went out and did the surveys. If we didn't want to know, we shouldn't have asked, but we asked, and they told us, and we need to listen. So there is a motion and a second. Yes.
Can I comment? This is the second Band-Aid. We put one on the previously, and what we're doing is an additional Band-Aid, meaning that we're going another 5% into the reserve. What I'm saying is that I think that the first Band-Aid was a good compromise to the situation we're in. But the second Band-Aid, I'm trying to understand, in a 3-month to 4-month period, we'll have a very clear understanding of where we are. Mm-hmm. I just feel that we do have a little bit of time here to make a decision and be a little bit more prudent on how we spend the money. I was hesitant before to go into the reserve. I would just say that I just want to make sure that we're not saying that this is a second Band-Aid, mm-hmm. and we could do a third or fourth, and I just don't want us to get into that too soon. But I do appreciate where you guys are going with it. I just feel we still need an associate engineer as well.
That's another motion.
Okay.
That's another motion. So if we can close this motion out,
Well, I was just trying to have a discussion as to I see the urgency, but I'm trying to understand the why.
Mm-hmm. What's a substitute motion to? I want to hear this. We're just jumping straight to motions.
Can we just have clarity and as far as can we vote on
Are you
this
calling the
motion?
question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can we call the question?
Yes. So through the chair, we have a motion by Councilmember Martinez-Ruman that was seconded by Mayor Toms. Councilmember Martinez-Ruman can entertain a friendly amendment to her motion or accept a substitute motion. If she's unwilling to accept, then there needs to be a vote on the existing motion. If it obviously there could be subsequent motions after that.
And what is the substitute?
Yes, the substitute motion is a motion to lift the hiring freeze on the CIP manager position, the associate civil engineer position, both in the Public Works Department, and 2 of the sworn officer positions. Add the allocations back to those positions and withdraw the difference from the general fund reserve, net of the surplus of $40,465.
So lift the freeze, but what about the funding of it?
And add the allocations back to those positions, withdraw it from the general fund reserve.
So that's 87,409, 40,178, plus the 2 vacant police officer positions at 356,472.
Yes.
So let me understand your substitute motion. You actually are dipping into the reserves greater than, in a larger amount that I had proposed,
Yes.
so that we could have funding for positions in Public Works as well as in the Police Department.
Want to clarify that with a question to Director Guillory. So on Councilor Martinez Rubin's motion, what percentage of the general fund reserve would that be, in addition to the 5% that we already have in place?
It's probably easier just to give a quantified amount rather than a percentage.
I would also like a percentage just to put things into perspective as
Okay,
well.
I'll need to do the calculation.
Every
Um,
100,000
we-
is 1%.
Yeah,
Mhm.
close to, yes, it's close to it. And then remember that there's a $40,000 surplus, so if the CIP manager allocation were covered, we would just shift that over, and so the withdrawal from the general reserve will be net of that amount.
Gotcha.
So we'd be adding the amounts for the 2 officers, the 356,000, plus the 87,000 for the associate civil engineer.
And that would be roughly around 3% additional in the general fund reserve.
Yes.
So I
based
think
on
the question that
100%.
Councilor Martinez maybe is asking is the initial motion, which is to lift the hiring freeze for the 2 officer positions, and 1 sergeant position. Then my substitute motion to fund 2 of the vacant police officer positions and the 2 public works positions. Which lifting of the hiring freezes dips more into the general fund reserve amount? No worries.
Can you state your question again, Vice Mayor? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I actually
So the
didn't
question
catch it.
is, there were 2 motions on the floor.
Mhm.
The first was to lift the hiring freeze for the 2 vacant police officer positions and the 1 vacant police sergeant position. The other motion was to lift the hiring freeze for 2 vacant police officer positions and the 2 vacant public works positions.
Got it.
And my question is, which of those dips further into the reserves?
Oh,
Yes.
The first motion does.
right, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the first.
By what amount? Is it pretty substantial, or? Because that would include the $203,831 funded for the police sergeant position.
It should be 3 times that amount. So 3%.
It's approximately $117,000 difference.
More. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think, I believe the substitute motion that I provided is a good middle ground. And once again, there are opportunities to revisit this in the mid-year adjustment. And by then, we will understand the outcome of the election in terms of the half-cent sales tax measure. That will give us more context to see if we can lift the hiring freeze for the additional police sergeant position. But at the moment, right now, I believe this is a good middle ground, and so that's my substitute motion. Thank you for answering the questions.
Okay, and what I take away is that the intent of the substitute motion also will allow us to have recruitment for positions in the next several months. We will also have that additional information, whether those positions are actually taken up or used, or there's hiring for them. And we'll know that about the time that we are expecting news about either a measure and or other circumstances that we would have to consider at that point and in January, at least in January. Okay, all right, I'll accept that substitute motion.
And do I need to accept it since I was the seconder?
So we now have a new substitute motion on the floor, so we will need a second.
A second.
I don't, okay. All right. Any further discussion?
I just have to say that I feel we're going into an election year. I feel that this is a little bit more. I'd prefer us being a little bit more conservative, so I won't be supporting this.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that I had that chance to comment. I think that we should be a little bit more cautious, but
Okay.
I understand everybody's vote and respect it.
And I want to make sure that the motion is clear. Okay, it's clear. Do you want to do roll call vote?
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Murphy.
Say the motion again, please.
The substitute motion is to for the hiring freeze on, let me find the right place here, the CIP manager position, the associate civil engineer position, and the 2 officer positions, and to cover the remaining amount from the general reserve.
And that brings it to from 50 to what?
I believe it's 43%.
And to clarify, City Clerk, part of the motion, or the last part of the motion was net of the surplus of the remainder of
The surplus of the budget, yes, the 40,000. Thank you.
Yes, it brings it down to 43%.
So 43 instead of
43,
45.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay, roll call?
Thank you. Councilmember Murphy.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez Rubin.
Yes.
Councilmember Tave.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Sasai.
Yes.
And Mayor Toms.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and there were some other budget reductions that were proposed earlier from Councilmember Martinez Rubin, but there was no motion on it. Do you want to move forward on that, or?
I think if I may respond to that, Mayor Toms, it's because the discussion has to do with not, at this point, what we'd like to have happen, I think, tonight as a council is to adopt a balanced budget. And the discussion that would have to occur about other reductions fall into the one-time operating budget items. So I think that's for a later time.
Okay. Is the council ready to adopt the budget?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
We have roll call?
Thank you. Councilmember Murphy.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez Rubin.
Yes.
Councilmember Tave.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sasai.
Yes.
Mayor Toms.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. All right, with that, let's see, we have 2 items left on the agenda. Next item is approval of the fiscal year 24-25 through 28-29 5-year capital improvement plan.
Okay, thank you, Council, Mayor, and public and staff. I'm going to present the final proposed capital improvement plans for 24-25 to 28-29. Next slide, please. So the final proposed plan, CIP, has a total 38 capital projects and 5 infrastructure assessments. For the fiscal year 24-25, there are 35 capital projects slated for work and 5 infrastructure assessments. The project categories are facilities, parks, sewers, stormwater, streets and roads, and infrastructure assessments. Next slide, please. The summary of projects in the final proposed CIP. These are the new projects for the fiscal year 24-25. Some of the park improvements, private sewer lateral program, road maintenance repairs, storm drain creek discharge improvements, and one of the major projects that we are actually about to, that got approved by council and consent today, that was the Pinole trunk sewer capacity phase 2 project, sidewalk rehab program. Next slide, please. So as you can see the schedule, so this is actually presented, prepared for the last council. I had supposed to have changed that June 18 date, but this is the finally got adopted via adoption of the budget. Next slide, please. This is a summary of all the budget by fund details for all the various projects in the CIP. We have about a total of $18 million worth of projects for the upcoming fiscal year. And this shows the split from various grant funds, gas tax, and growth impact fees, and enterprise funds. So one of the major works that we're going to be taking up this year are actually some sewer projects, major sewer rehab in the town, as well as some sewer lateral programs to help some of the private sewer lateral being rectified. And next slide, please. This I had prepared just to explain how the CIP and the environmental position freezing would affect the CIP work. But as it is discussed in the council, this has been funded, and we'll be able to continue our current CIP program, as well as we'll be able to take up, once we complete the recruitment for associate engineer position, we'll be able to take up the new CIP projects as well. Next slide, please. And that's all I have for my presentation, and any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you for that report. I'll start with Councilmember Tave.
No questions.
And Councilmember Martinez-Rubin.
No questions.
And Councilmember Murphy.
None.
And Vice Mayor.
No, thank you.
Okay, and I have none as well. So we'll go to the public.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have Rafael Menes in person.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Rafael Mess. I'm a resident of Pinole. And I think on this item, I might be permitted to say that I'm also the chair of the Planning Commission. And I have a comment with regards to item FA 2302, which the Planning Commission found was not in conformity with the general plan. I noted that on page 504 of the agenda packet that it was noted as meeting several general plan goals and policies that the Planning Commission explicitly found it did not in fact meet. So if the council chose to adopt this item that's before it, would that mean that it would be adopting FA 2302 and overriding the Planning Commission's decision? Or is that simply in there as sort of a carryover from the prior packet? And if the council adopted this item before it, that it would not be adopting FA 2302? Or would it simply be adopting it but without general plan justification? Just wanted to get that clarified. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments?
Yes, Irma Ruport.
I don't have a whole lot to say about the capital improvement plan projects. I think Sanjay's doing a great job. I really take heed to what he's saying, and I really would like to follow up on some of these projects and make sure they get done. The only thing I have a concern about is sometimes when we hire these contractors and consultants, we hold them to the letter of the contract and make sure they are out there doing what they have to do. But I just want to thank Sanjay and staff and everybody else. I think we need to continue the projects. Thank you.
Okay, any other speakers?
No more public comments.
Okay, thank you. If I can ask Director Mishra to address the FA 2302 question of general plan conformity.
So we brought this CIP to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission discussed about this project, and a motion was made, and Planning Commission determined that the goals and the policies what we have identified, it does not meet the Planning Commission's understanding of the goals and policies. Our planning manager also provided some comments with respect to these details. And so during that discussion, as this project was not prioritized, so I actually moved this project to the next fiscal year so that there could be another further discussion. The council has an opportunity to do that. And just another thing I wanted to mention here, this project was initially put in the CIP last fiscal year. And during that time, the Planning Commission probably did not get into the details. And this issue of not meeting the general policies and goals was not brought up in the previous fiscal year. So as this was not a priority project, I moved the funding to the next year, and then we will have another opportunity to discuss this.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bringing it back to council then. Yes, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Toms. I want to ask clarifying questions on the FA 2302 Plum Street parking lot improvements and the feedback that we had got from the Planning Commission. Can you go into a little more detail in terms of what facets of that project was not in conformity with the general plan?
I believe one of the planning commissioners was not in favor of the project scope, which actually describes as if it is a public parking lot, and having the chain link fence was not aesthetically pleasing as being the in there, and there is no evidence of any safety issues or being any vandalism and all that. And that's the reason why the Planning Commission chose to make a motion and vote on, yeah.
And it was a determination that it was not in non-conformity. It was a recommendation to take the project off of the CIP?
No, it was not, because the Planning Commission does not have that authority to do that. They were actually tasked to only review all the CIP projects and give their decision whether this conforms to the general plan, and that's the. And they were advised by the city attorney and planning manager that they should just review this based on only what they are supposed to review based on project details.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Toms. That project data and/or information, did it include that so-called evidence or the basis for even proposing this project last year? Either last year and or this year, was there that evidence of crime, which I am understanding is the reason for proposing that there be fencing? That's one matter. The aesthetics we've heard here as public comment, that can be attended to later. But the barrier itself, is there still, as far as staff is concerned, a need for that, given the current violations or crime that have occurred and have been documented?
So this project was brought forward by PD because there were some concerns about some of the police vehicles being vandalized, or I'm not sure what was the vandalism. So, but that was brought forward by the PD to actually have a safer enclosure where we actually can have other city vehicles and the PD vehicles can be left and locked a portion of the parking lot. So that was the idea there. But and the details of the vandalism, I don't don't have the details of that. But maybe the police chief can provide some details.
I'm open to hearing those.
Yes.
Here you have them. Thank you.
So the request came during the 2021-2020 season when we had employees being followed out of the police department. We wanted to enhance the abilities to protect our employees and where they were parking to and from. There were officers that were getting ambushed around the country at their vehicles, and that took place. And at the same time, a decision prior to my arrival here in the seat, they took away 2 spots in front of the police department for EV charging. That took away parking for our dispatchers to walk safely under surveillance, to be able to walk safely to their cars, leaving at 3 a.m. with no escorts to be able to take them. So the request at that time was to let's have a secured parking like many other police departments around the country, so our employees had a place to feel safe to get in and out of their car when they arrived at work, and that was the emphasis behind the request.
Thank you. If I can suggest that since this is being deferred to the next fiscal year, that a little bit more work be done to determine if cameras would be the appropriate security measure or a different design. From my understanding, it's really that the Planning Commission objected to a design in Old Town Pinole of chain link fences versus some of the more decorative fences that could possibly provide the added security. But I believe that was the major issue with that. So bringing it back, any other comments or a motion?
Yeah, an additional comment. Yeah, consistent with what was requested earlier as an agenda item, I believe, by Mayor Pro Tem Sasai to have a presentation about increased safety for our safety staff. I think then that the matter is still current, very much so. Yeah, and again, the aesthetics is a separate issue, evidently. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. With that, if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the CIP as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that motion passes 5-0. Okay, we will move on to the next item on the agenda is new business 12A, and this is a discussion of the process for establishing an office of the elected mayor, and we are to receive a report and provide direction.
Great. So good evening, Mayor and City Council, staff and members of the public. Eric Kasher, City Attorney here in Pinole. I'll be providing an overview of the process for establishing the office of an elected mayor here in the City of Pinole. Next slide. So staff's recommendation is to receive this report and presentation and then provide direction to staff on next steps for the establishment of an elected mayor here in the city. So as by way of background, on May 21st, the City Council approved a request for future agenda item by Councilmember Murphy for a staff level presentation at the City Council for the process of establishing an elected mayor. The City Council is currently comprised of 5 City Council members that are elected at large to 4-year terms. The position of mayor is rotated annually, and it's based on the number of votes received by each council member in the prior election. Next slide. So a little background on the procedures. The California Government Code provides the requirements for establishing an elected mayor. It requires that the position of elected mayor be established through a voter-approved ballot measure. The ballot measure would need to appear on the ballot during a general election, a general municipal election, in the government code provides that the question that would be presented to the voters are the following three. Shall the electors elect a mayor and 4 city council members? Shall the term of office of mayor be 2 years, or shall the term of office of mayor be 4 years? Next slide. Additionally, if a majority of the votes cast are in favor of an elected mayor, then one of the seats on the city council will be designated as the office of the mayor at the following general election held in the city of Pinole. To initiate the process of transitioning to an elected mayor, the city council would adopt a resolution calling for a measure to be added to the general election ballot, and that ballot measure would need to be added to the ballot 88 days before the election, which is sometime in the first week or 2 of August. Next slide. The powers of the mayor. So an elected mayor, generally speaking, has all of the powers and duties of a member of the city council. For the most part, the elected mayor has all of those same powers as an appointed mayor. The appointed mayor serves as the chair of the city council and presides over the city council meetings, administers oaths and affirmations, certifies affidavits and acknowledges documents which are executed by the city, directs peace officers to attend public meetings, and there are other roles and responsibilities that are provided for the mayor as set forth in our municipal code. Next slide. An elected mayor, there are essentially 2 kind of additional powers that can be provided to an elected mayor in a general law city, and the city of Pinole is a general law city. One of those would be the ability to appoint the members of boards, commissions, and committees, and so those appointments would be made by the mayor and approved by the city council. And additionally, the city council can consider a salary for an elected mayor in addition to the salary that's established for city council members. So there can be a difference between the salary that's received by an elected mayor as opposed to council members. Next slide. For example, there are a few other cities in Contra Costa County that have an elected mayor. The city of Richmond, the city of San Ramon, and the city of Brentwood are some examples of that. Fiscal impact, so there would need to be a ballot measure, so the voters would need to decide whether or not the city wanted to move to an elected mayor position. The cost for the general election ballot measure would be about $25,000, so that's the cost of the fee that gets paid to the county for administering the election, as well as there'll be some additional staff time related to that. And I'll happy to answer any questions the council may have or members of the public.
All right. Any questions? Seeing none. Oh, yes. Councilmember Martinez-Rubin.
Okay, so thank you, City Attorney Casher. In your presentation, on the slide that with the header procedural requirements continued, it reads, if a majority of the votes cast are in favor of an elected mayor, 1 seat on the council will be designated as the office of the mayor at the next general municipal election. So would that be in 2026?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's one question. So the next slide related to powers of the mayor. For the most part, I'm quoting, an elected mayor has the same powers as an appointed mayor. So question, this is probably up for discussion later, why then have an elected mayor? With regard to the possibilities of additional powers, there's mention of ability to make appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. That would do away with the ad hoc committees that we now have for interviewing those kinds of the commission and committees. Although even with the existence of ad hocs, it seems that council here has overridden the recommendations by those ad hocs. We've experienced that recently, both for the Planning Commission and previously for the Community Services Commission. An elected mayor may collect a salary in addition to the salary established. Do you have any idea what that salary estimate would be for a city the size of Pinole? And is that salary determined by, I love this word, by statute or administrative code of some sort?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I'll provide a little bit of background on the process just to as context. So if the voters decide to move forward with an elected mayor, then within the next year or so, we'd bring forward an ordinance because we'd need to amend our municipal code to create the office of elected mayor. And it would be through that process and the legislative process of adopting the ordinance that the council would consider the salary, the 2, versus 4 year, which of the city council seats would become the elected mayor. So that process would follow the actual ballot measure. I don't know the range of salaries for mayors of various cities, but that would be something that would be determined by the city council.
In one of your slides, neighboring cities with elected mayors, you mentioned 3 cities as examples: City of Richmond, City of San Ramon, and Brentwood. Martinez doesn't appear here on this slide, but let's go with Richmond, San Ramon, and Brentwood as presented. These cities are within Contra Costa County. At this point, elections in those cities are by district, unlike City of Pinole. As well, the populations of those cities are anywhere from 3 to 4 times larger than Pinole. City of Richmond, population 2024, January, was about 112,735. In San Ramon, the population in 2022 was about 86,119, the 4th largest city in Contra Costa County. And in Brentwood, the population in 2022 was 66,854. And just another little tidbit there, that was a 287% increase since the 2000 census. So all these experiences are very unlike what we have in Pinole, where our population hovers around 19,000, and we do not have district elections. We have at-large elections, where council members are to represent the citizenry at large. So question to you, City Attorney Casher, the choice of presenting Richmond, San Ramon, and Brentwood was because?
They're just the other cities that I'm familiar with in Contra Costa County. It sounds like Martinez may also have an elected mayor. Just wanted to provide some examples of neighboring cities that have an elected mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I have a couple. We didn't do any polling on this to find out if there's interest in the electorate.
No, we did have the Lou Edwards group, as presented previously at a prior council meeting, do some polling around a couple of different ballot measure options. This was not one of the ballot measure options that was polled by the consultant.
Okay, and if the, putting this on the ballot for this year, the cost would be $25,000. If it were to pass, future elections, would the cost go up because you're asking a second question?
Yeah, I mean, this would be a reoccurring kind of, depending on the term of the mayor position, it would be either every 2 or every 4 years we would have an election for mayor.
So it would increase the cost of the elections?
I can help to answer that question. The costing model that the county uses is in part based on the ballot space. So if we have an additional race, that does raise the price for a certain factor.
Okay, thank you. All right, yes.
Mayor Thomas, if I may have another. Again, this is under procedural requirements to understand what's permissible, what's acceptable, what is best practice in terms of the language that appears on a ballot, which is really all that the citizenry, the voters, get to see. The questions that you have here: shall the electors elect a mayor and 4 city council members? Shall the term of office of mayor be 2 years? Shall the term of office of mayor be 4 years? That is it, then. That is all that a voter would see to decide yes or no in response to any of the questions.
So thank you for the question. So if the council provides direction to move forward, staff would bring forward on July 16th, a second item where we would actually draft the ballot language and present that to the city council for formal approval in the form of resolution to place on the ballot. These kind of questions that as I've laid out, those are just what are identified in the government code as like the requisite language. That's what needs to be included. But the actual ballot language would be a little bit different, and that would be approved by the council if there's direction to move forward.
Okay, so thank you. So if I may continue. So at that time, if this were to move forward and you work behind the scenes to bring to council some ballot language, conceivably, would you include such things as to provide context to the voter about qualifications for a candidate to be an elected mayor, background, again, related to qualifications, former record, if you will, all of that context which adds to understanding the ballot measure language. What kinds of things would you bring back to us?
Yeah, so the ballot language would be very simple and similar to what's provided. The city attorney's office does provide an impartial analysis, so any ballot measure for the city is accompanied by an impartial analysis by the city attorney's office, and that it's an impartial analysis, so it's just breaking down, kind of cost-related issues, and it's a very objective assessment of the impact of the ballot measure. But that's really all that would be included if there were. If it were approved by the voters and then we move forward to the process of adopting an ordinance here in the city, that's when there can be some discussion of qualifications and other things related to the actual elected mayor position, and that would be incorporated into the municipal code. But the question to the voters is really, would you like to have an elected mayor and then 2 or 4 year term? That's really what we would need from the voters.
Okay, and again, related to timeline, if indeed this ballot measure were on the ballot in November, when would it be that the discussion about the details, in which in my mind, it's the details that count, it's the context that provides what indeed would be the additional authority / power of someone that would be elected, and also a time for council and the public to weigh in on what implications there might be, given that the governance structure would be different. So again, timeline?
July 16th, because we have to place this formally on the ballot within the first 2 weeks of August. So it's the July 16th meeting that if this moves forward and the council directs, it would be the July 16th meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Vice Mayor has a question.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. So it was mentioned we had not done polling on this ballot measure. For context, do you have any info on other cities that have had a similar ballot measure for an elected mayor, and what percentage did it pass or fail?
I do not have that information, no.
Gotcha. Second question is, I'm wondering about the impacts to the ballot measure we had directed to put on the ballot in November, which is the half-cent sales tax. That is my main priority. I'll just be very upfront, honest with that. What does the data show on the impact of a additional non-tax measure to other measures on the ballot?
So we did not do polling on the elected mayor position, so we don't have data for that. I can just communicate anecdotally through our consultant. They very much prefer just one ballot measure. Frankly, for the voters, it makes things less complicated. There's less voter confusion. So typically, one ballot measure, especially if it polls well, that's the preference. But we didn't poll whether or not if there were these two, how would it fare 62 versus 70%. So we don't have those data points. But I think anecdotally, our consultant would probably agree that one ballot measure is probably ideal.
Thank you. You don't have any info in terms of just the electoral political science of ballot measures in terms of an additional non-tax measure being on the ballot. In terms of how many points you think an additional tax measure would take?
I wouldn't feel. Yeah, we would want to have polling done to be precise about that. Yeah, I don't know at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll open it up to the public, please.
Thank you. Ana Avila, Amy Eubanks, and Rafael Menes.
Hello. I'm here again representing Local 1, and I just find this odd that we're doing this proposed ballot, and we're going to spend $25,000 when we just went through the budget. And you are going to freeze positions in the police department. You're gonna do all this. You make cuts for other departments, but you want to make this a priority. And in the 24 years I've been working here in the city of Pinole, the council has been the same. It has run the same. There being other changes on the terms, but not an elected mayor. So I would disagree with this measure.
Yes, so I'm going to second Anna's comment in the sense that we just got done talking about a budget and having to adjust a budget, which I'm grateful for the outcome of that. But we just talked about cutting all across the board, all over the place. There's a couple of discrepancies that I'm seeing in the presented PowerPoint where it was said that it would be $25,000 to put it on the ballot, but then on page 586 or I don't know what page number this is. It says it's $30,000, and that doesn't include the cost of staff and time and energy. And I mean cost is in like time and resources that the staff has to use to be able to get this item on the ballot. A quick Google search to answer a question about a salary for a mayor, an elected mayor. This doesn't account for our small city, but just a quick Google search said that it's anywhere between $48,000 to $70,000. Mind you, you guys have the ability to, make that salary at whatever rate you guys want. And then on top of, I heard the city attorney say that we would have to amend the Pinole Municipal Code for this. That's, now we're talking additional staff time and energy. And I just don't see that we have the financial means and resources to put this on the ballot in November, especially now having heard that having two measures might be detrimental to the measure that's generating revenue. And here we are all saying that collectively we should be working to generate revenue to bring in money for the city so that we don't experience the same budget deficit in the coming years. So I would say that this probably isn't a good time and place to do it. If it's something that the city wants and the people want, we definitely should be doing a poll, that we should be gathering a poll from the city to see if the citizens even want something like this. But that's all I have.
Greetings again, Mayor, Council, staff, and members of the public. My name is Rafael Menace. I'm a resident of the city of Pinole. And I have a few sort of questions and comments about this item. First off, if the council chose to move forward with this process and the electorate ultimately voted to adopt an elected mayor position, would it be bound by the same term limits as council members are, or would it not be bound by term limits, or would that be determined in the nature of the measure? Because that's something that hasn't been brought up yet. And I think that will be an important factor for a lot of people to consider. And my second point is, basically it seems like there's significant downside risk from a political science perspective. I'm not, a formal doctorate political science, but I did get a bachelor's degree in political science, so I have some experience in the field. And I feel like there's a risk in bringing this item up that you're creating more potential cleavages, fracture points in the electorate that could be exposed to break up factions and make it harder to pass any item. Because you could have some people say, okay, well, maybe I'm unsure about the tax measure, but I'm definitely against an elected mayor. So the people who are against an elected mayor and who maybe are more likely to also be against a tax measure could say, well, if you're against an elected mayor, you should also be against the tax measure. It would make it easier for them to make that argument, call it like, I don't know, a power overreach or whatever political argument they want to use, regardless of whether it's valid or not. It's about, breaking up the population into more groups and being able to divide it against itself. The more questions you have, the more ways, the more divisions that can be created, the more factions that can be split against each other, basically. And I think with regards to this particular question at this particular time, given some of the discussions we've heard tonight and in prior weeks, that there would be a greater risk of that than typically. that it would be more likely to be the case that the people who are against the tax measure would be able to use the elected mayor measure to attack the tax measure by proxy and to weaken the tax measure by proxy. So I think just from a political science perspective, that's something to consider. And I'm sure that other members of the council also have their political science perspective, and other staff members have their perspective to consider. But, you know, just from my personal poli-sci perspective, that's what I bring up for consideration on this matter. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Leisha. I grew up in this town. I've been here my whole life. I don't understand why we're talking about putting $30,000 into a question when our mayors have worked just fine. We just got done talking about a deficit that you guys had to pull from our reserves to fix. This makes no sense. This is not a time to be spending extra money that we just don't have when we're talking about pulling resources from the rest of the city. That doesn't financially, responsibility, like it just doesn't make sense to me. If somebody could explain to me why we feel we need to do this now, and on top of it, you're talking about you're going to need to pay them extra on when we're talking about we're not even sure that we have enough money to pay officers that you guys want to pay a whole nother year, especially, and then 2 other positions. You guys don't have a long-term solution. This doesn't make sense, in my opinion. I don't feel as a citizen that this is the best use of the money based off what we just got done talking about. If we're going to be responsible, then I think we need to look at possibly waiting until you have a better position financially for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Irma Ruport, Debbie Long. Actually, okay, she's no longer here. And then Ruthie Abelson Olivas.
Good evening again, Mayor, Council, staff, and public. And I'm mixed with this information. However, I just want to clarify some things. Power of the mayor, most part, it's an elected mayor, has the same powers as an appointed mayor. That's on the powers. And the other thing too, the ability to make appointments to boards, commissions, and committees subject to approval by the city council. So the council has to approve it anyway. I applied for a commission 3 or 4 years ago, and the ad hoc was the one that didn't approve me. So it's not like the mayor's not going to approve you. The ad hoc committees do the same. So I'm just putting that forward. Collecting a salary, that's done through an ordinance, so you can either pass it or not pass it. I have a problem with the cities a lot of times when we have issues. You don't go out to the public. You don't go out to the taxpayer. But you yourself in here within this confined room, we say yay or nay. But you know what? Guess who's in charge? The taxpayers. I personally would like to see some of these issues go out to the taxpayer. Yeah, we hire consultants over and over again, 20, 30,000, just so that we can have 100 people say, no, 75% don't want it and 60% do. So my thing is, don't be afraid to put some of this in the ballot. Put it out. I've lived here 47 years. And when you have things like this, don't start this discussion and disagreement and throwing mud at everybody's faces. It's about time we started thinking about the taxpayer out there, making some of these decisions. And 100 people surveyed is not a good survey. And consultants are $20,000, $30,000 that don't do this kind of job. No, put it on the taxpayers. Put it on the ballot. Maybe not now, later, I don't know. But every time you have an issue, put it to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Okay, is Ruthie Abelson Olivas here? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Toms, council, and staff. I'm a resident. I'm equally confused and disappointed today. Maybe even a little bit angry, which doesn't happen to me often. I don't like to speak at council meetings, but I will when I feel it is warranted. The topic of having a separate mayoral election was discussed not too long ago, and I spoke out then. And here we are again. I could focus on the financial part about how much needed city funds should not be spent on this when we're already having such financial problems as we've been discussing tonight. I could focus on how residents were not polled about this, so it calls into question why. Instead, I want to focus on what I see as council members playing games and their antics. Why were several members of the council suddenly unavailable last meeting and therefore a quorum was not met? If this was intentional to get a vote to go a certain way, I'm disgusted at your lack of disrespect for the city and your elected position. If that was intentional, it was a sign of immaturity. Only a child hides when they don't get their way. If it was intentional, you should be ashamed and embarrassed for wasting the time of the council members who are ready to be here, the public who wanted to be here, and both the time and salaries of our hardworking city staff. When I try to fathom why this is even a topic of discussion, I can't help but to think it is based around personal political agendas and egos. Some of you may want to serve in higher elected positions, which is 100% a great goal. But if you're making decisions based upon only personal and selfish goals, believe me, the voters will remember that. Is this the legacy you want to leave behind? The current system works. The residents do not have an issue with this. And we should instead only be talking about actual important issues for Pinole, not ones for any political career aspirations and ego. Thank you.
Mayor, we have a telephone caller online. Last four numbers 5748.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yes. My name is Anthony Lossbrink, a longtime citizen of Pinole, over 40 plus years. And I represent the citizens community in my own backyard and front yard for a better Pinole, and I don't see how this is going to make Pinole a better place. Therefore, I'm echoing and I offer kudos to the 4 out of the past 5 speakers that are against having an elected mayor on the ballot come this November. I think further investigations and conversations and discussions can be made possibly at a later date, but not when you're trying to get 1 or 2 tax initiatives on the ballot, not to mention the cost for $25,000 without staff costs to get it onto the ballot, plus the annual salary compensation plan of somewhere near or around $50,000 a year. Our city isn't in a position to take that on right now with a $1.3 million a year deficit. And it's those same 2 or 3 people or gentlemen that were pushing this initiative are the same ones that also voted for the 2 out of the 3 last fireworks shows that ended up costing the city close to in excess of $100,000 for no fireworks show that we gave to the city of Hercules. And we're not in the business to promote and push personal or political interests or agendas with certain candidates on the city council for a mayorship at this point in time. And I don't think Pinole is the kind of city that wants to see that coming down on us upon in the future.
Sir, you have
as I would
45
say,
seconds.
and a lot of people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Thank you.
Debbie Long.
Good evening. Didn't think you could get rid of me that easily, did you? I just wanted to say that I'm strongly opposed to an elected mayor. We don't have formal polling, but several years ago, when the council had the discussion on charter cities, one of the elements that people objected to was having an elected mayor. But all of the council reiterated that was not the purpose of a charter. Then last December, it was put on the agenda by Devin and Cameron not to have a council rotate the position of mayor. And based upon Devin's comments and relationships, he wanted to remain the mayor. After much opposition by the citizens, it was dropped. Now again, Devin wants the position for an elected mayor put on the ballot. And to boot, based upon the report, it can be a salaried position and have other powers such as appointing commissions and members. While you have that power somewhat today, I understand that there is another commission that Cameron wants formed, and that is a police oversight commission. I would hate to think that a mayor could appoint with the council majority, and as we see today, it's a very split council majority for a police commission. And ask yourselves, how much do you think an office of the mayor of Pinole will cost? Well, we've heard different numbers, but I'm sure it would cost $50,000 or more. And most likely, it would also have the pension benefits as well. We just finished with a struggling budget, and we shouldn't even consider putting this on ballot, especially if we do want to pass the measure for half-cent sales tax to help boost our revenues up again. So I just hope that the city council takes a look at what is important to them this November. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
There are no more public comments.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, we do have one more in person, Pete Murray.
Oh.
Once again, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, council members. I believe I've spoken on this about 3 different times now, and my position is that this council works best the way that it works today. For a small community like ours, everybody has a shot at being mayor. You have to learn to work together. You can't go off on a tangent, because maybe tomorrow when you're sitting there as vice mayor, you may have something that's of interest to you that you don't want to try to overwhelm the rest of the council with. And that's one of my big questions, and that needs to be explained, and that's abuse of the position. And maybe the city attorney can address that when I'm done. And who will be running the city? Will it be this mayor, or will it be the council? Will it be the office of the mayor who gives direction to the city manager to the detriment of the rest of the council? That goes on, and those are legitimate questions. I've been around for quite a while. The council, the way we have it set up now, it's been this way for as long as I've been here, over 50 years, and it works. But there's a chance, and I have seen it, where people take the position and they run with it. They all of a sudden become enamored with being the mayor, and to the detriment of the rest of the council. They sit there and peruse the information that the rest of the council gets and make selective choices. So therefore, as a council member, you're not getting all the information. I've seen it. It has happened. And I would think that the opportunity for an elected mayor with somebody that may have narcissistic tendencies, it would be guaranteed. So I'm saying it's not a good idea. Leave it the way it is. It works. It's established. It's guaranteed. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we will bring it back to council for any discussion. Anybody want to start? Or I can start.
I'll start since it was my item to present. And I, again, I'm always both surprised but also sometimes saddened about how we see democracy. And one of the passions I have in this both city and country is to build a more representative democracy. And so I always appreciate folks making their comments, and I also wonder what is so bad about going to the voters to ask them what and how they want to form their government. One of, someone said it works for whom? There's technically always one council member who doesn't become mayor. If you actually watch the last 100 years, or perhaps most of our time as a city, you'll see that, of course, 2 council members are put into rotation, and then there's one in this last election, I believe, is Councilmember Martinez Rubin, who won't have a chance to become mayor. So I just want to say, first of all, good evening, everyone. I want to take a moment to highlight the vitality and importance of having an elected mayor in Pinole. A mayor elected by the people serves as the embodiment of our community's aspirations and of our values. They are our advocate, they are our leader, they are our representative in local governance. Firstly, having an elected mayor ensures that our voices are heard directly, that our residents actually have a choice to determine who they want to lead the city as a mayor, and that their voices are heard directly. This mayor is accountable to residents, to taxpayers, the residents of Pinole, and ensuring that our concerns about public safety, infrastructure, and community development are prioritized and addressed effectively along with the city council. Secondly, an elected mayor provides continuity and stability in leadership. They bring a cohesive vision for the future of Pinole, collaborating with city council members, regional electeds and partners, as well as community stakeholders to drive progress and prosperity. This stability fosters trust and confidence in our local government, attracting investments, which we desperately need in the city, but also enhancing our quality of life of residents. Moreover, the mayor's role extends beyond administrative duties, and thank you to our city attorney for listing out several of them. The extension is that they are a symbol of unity and civic pride, rallying us together for common goals and celebrations. So whether it's promoting cultural events or supporting local businesses, or even advocating for sustainability measures, the mayor's leadership inspires civic engagement and volunteerism. An elected mayor in Pinole is not just a ceremonial figurehead, and I think I've heard that so many times, and sometimes that's challenging, and perhaps because I've held the role, I see that as challenging because I know what our residents in Pinole deserve, and it's not just a ceremonial position. Our residents deserve a figurehead, a mayor, a person who is a crucial architect of our city's future. A mayor ensures democratic representation, which is really what this is about. I recognize that folks have opinions, and I appreciate the opinions at the podium and want folks to be heard. I also want the residents of Pinole to decide on this decision, not 7 people at the podium, perhaps 3 of which have served in elected office before here in Pinole. The role of an elected mayor is also to promote the economic vitality and foster a sense of belonging among residents. So as we continue to grow and evolve, and I recognize that we're at 121 years, it's been a long time of evolving and growing, we have to also seek changes in our democracy and our system of government that let us recognize and appreciate the importance not of just the city council, not of just the staff, but the office of the mayor in shaping a vibrant and resilient community for generations to come. There was a question that I think that is often asked about what cities, so thank you City Attorney Kasher again for your research doing as it relates to San Ramon and Richmond and Antioch and Brentwood. Those are cities in in Contra Costa County that have elected mayors. Well, if you go right across the bridge, right to Vallejo, you'll find every single city in Solano County has an elected mayor, including Rio Vista and Sassoon, which are similar cities to our size. Rio Vista has a population of about 7,000, and Sassoon City has a population of about 29,000. But that's not just it. The city of Alameda, which is a city of 78,000, has an elected mayor. The city of Arcata, which is in Humboldt County, which is a city of 20,000 people, has an elected mayor. I mentioned the city of Dixon at 19,000. The city of Healdsburg, which is 11,000 in Sonoma County. The city of Eureka at 26,000. The city of Petaluma at 59,000. The city of Sonoma at 10,000. And the city of Dublin at 74,000. These are just some of the cities across California that have modernized their government and come into the 21st century and allowed residents to decide who they want as their mayor. And so I recognize that some of this is challenging perhaps for folks who haven't maybe lived in a city with an elected mayor, or see this system as something that may work for them. But there's a chance and opportunity, if you just give it a chance, that perhaps in the city, perhaps residents around the city could actually engage more in our democracy if they're able to vote on who their mayor is. So I just wanted to leave the council with that as we consider this decision. I know it's a hard decision. The budget was a hard decision for me, but I just, again, want to make sure folks know we are special. We are very special as a city, but across California, there is a movement to modernize government and modernize the office of the mayor, which is a very respectable office, and something that, again, both extends beyond administrative duties, but also fosters a sense of civic pride and cultural pride.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Tave.
I have a question about the cost. So we said it's $25,000, but I know that if you have one measure going out, it's not 25,000. Isn't there like a scale? So what would be the effective, or is 25,000 the effective, I guess, plus, or, addition there?
Yeah, I'll defer to the city clerk, who I think works more closely with the county on this. These are really rough estimates of the cost. I'm not sure that we know the actual cost, but it's somewhere between 25 and 30.
Yes, so to run a measure, as I mentioned before, there's a costing model that the county uses and then charges the city back. The $25,000 is a pretty good estimate of what it costs us to run a consolidated election with the county. And then with each additional question that you ask, there is a factor increase that is worked into there. So it wouldn't be another $25,000. It would be, I think the factor, so it's $2 to $3 per registered voter. And I think the factor that I think we can estimate about $6,000 for an additional question.
Right. So in theory, we would have the question of the sales tax. That's one question. $25,000 that we would have to pay as a minimum. And then adding an additional question would be a $6,000.
I can't give you an exact estimate, but yeah, the costing model that they use, they say like a 1.1 point something or 1.13, I think she mentioned at one point. It really depends on their final costs and how they break it down. But yes, I think 6,000 would be a ballpark.
Got it.
For each additional.
So in theory, we would be, and Director Guillory might be able to answer, do we just unbalance the budget by doing that? That's a yes, right, from the crowd? Okay. So we would have to come up with an additional $6,000 from somewhere. Ish, ballparking. Okay. No, that's my questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Martinez-Rubin.
May I make a motion?
Okay. Can I make some comments?
Oh, sure.
Before? You do that? Okay. Yes. My comments include, the current rotation has worked for 121 years. There's been no polling asking the residents if there should be a change in how the rotation happens. We just finished a budget discussion where we had to use some reserves for the next fiscal year, and we should not be spending additional funds on this item. We need to focus, and I mean focus, on a revenue measure and not dilute the need of that measure with another measure. Other cities have shown us that the winner of an out-of-cycle mayor could leave a council seat open, while the council member, while another council member that's in the same cycle might risk losing a council seat only to come in second. And I think my point on that is that if, well, let me move on to this other piece. The current rotation allows for a rotation of the mayoral position with at least 2 years of council experience, which is very important, while a directly elected mayor could result in someone with no experience, just a very good campaigner. If there is somebody out of cycle in the mayor, running for mayor, and they are elected mayor, they then vacate their seat. That seat for the next 2 years is appointed by the council, not the voters, the council. So, you know, as you want to increase democracy on one end, you're decreasing it on the other. The other piece is that state law provides that a salary, not just the stipend, could be paid to an elected mayor. And again, we're getting to the budget item. So if there's no other, I don't know if anybody else has any other comments, but
Well, we have to, I do have comments because some of the statements you're making are infactual. So the rotation that we have, the mayorship has not always been a rotational position. I think there was a time where there wasn't a rotating mayor and that the mayor continued to be just voted on simply by council. So let's just name truth for what it is. It hasn't been the same process that we've had throughout the entire 121 years of the city of Pinole. That's verified from those of us who've done that research. And so I just want to name that. But I also want to say that there's an opportunity here to also recognize that part of the democracy that I'm naming is not necessarily the what could be an adjudication of the system that we have currently, you know, moving around and people having 2 years. It is about actually putting the hands back into the people of Pinole. You know, we're not necessarily doing that with the current process. So I just wanted to clarify, like, the building democracy comment I'm talking about is about, again, direct democracy, allowing voters to decide how they want to do it. I want to say, you know, obviously it was very challenging as the last city council meeting really requested us to not decrease the reserve. Coming back now, I've been very amendable to supporting, I don't know if it was your mayor or Councilmember Taves' recommendation to kind of to now, you know, deplete some of our reserves. But I think it's just, again, I would venture to ask, like, how might we create systems that are new in our city? And I know that it's easy for us in our work every day to consider the status quo. I think it's easy to do that. I mean, the status quo is what's in front of us every morning. But as I've served on this council for 3 years now, including as mayor and mayor pro tem, and have completed those 10 years, I also recognize that there are structural governance issues that we have to test out and try out. I am open. Obviously, the council, each one of you have your own decision of moving this forward, and I recognize $30,000 may be something where it's like, hey, that's a big number. I also just, again, encourage you or implore you to really think about, like, governance issues that perhaps this is one of those things that we can explore to see if this changes things. But again, I understand your perspective. I respect it as well. So
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. You had a motion?
Yes, my motion is to move, to table the issue of establishing the office of the mayor indefinitely.
Is there a second? I'll second. Do you want to do roll call vote?
Sure. Councilmember Murphy?
no.
Councilmember Martinez Rubin?
Yes.
Councilmember Tave?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Sasai?
No.
And Mayor Toms?
Yes.
Okay. Motion fails.
Is there some other direction you want to provide? Or provide no direction at all?
Let me look at my
Okay,
notes.
seeing no other motion,
Well,
there is no direction provided. Okay,
thank you.
so we will move on.
So I would like to move that we direct the city attorney to prepare language for a ballot measure to be placed before the voters in November of 2024 election. The measure should outline and propose the establishment of an elected mayor position for the city of Pinole, outlining key aspects, including the method of election, including whether the mayor will be elected at large, more than likely, the term length and limitations as mentioned by the city attorney. And I asked that the city attorney present the proposed language for the ballot measure to the city council no later than July 16th, 2024, which has already been acknowledged, and to allow for review and public input through that process as well, which I'm happy to work with the city attorney on as well, but I'm sure we've talked about this before, so.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Okay. that
No worries.
Motion fails.
All
So no action taken. We will move on to item 13, which is citizens to be heard. This is for citizens that have not had an opportunity to speak during the first public comment period. Do we have any public speakers? Yeah, if you spoke during the first public comment, that's it. Okay.
We did have a gentleman earlier. Were you wanting to speak? Thank you. If you can please state your name for the record.
My name's Richard Kostel. I'm sorry I'm late. I got here late. It's just regarding roads. You're familiar with Deutsch. You know the problem. There's a similar problem in front of my driveway. I'm on Jordan. And the issue with Deutsch is you have a naturally occurring spring, and it weakens the underlying underlying soil. My house also has a naturally occurring spring. And I've been in communications with Joseph and, Letitia since last year. They came out and just did a quick patch. Garbage truck went right over it again. I just requested, just via email, that the pothole gets included in the project with Deutsch. And I haven't gotten a response back and forth. And so if someone would like to have a email trail.
Yeah, we're not able to respond to your public comment, but the Public Works Director is here. And if you could meet with Sanjay
Sure.
and trade contact information,
Sure.
I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah. And just I know that it's more than just patch.
It is.
because
It's the drainage underneath.
It's not just drain. I mean, it's the whole soil structure. They just put asphalt on it. It doesn't work. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we have an adjournment to the regular city council meeting of July 2nd, 2024. And I just want to remind the council that we have a couple of carryover items from the last meeting, plus we're going to have the contract for our city manager. We anticipate this to be a very short meeting because at 7 o'clock we will have, there will be a workshop on the sewer rate changes at 7 o'clock on that evening. So with that, thank you all for your participation. And it's earlier than what we discussed. Thank you.